you know, that's the elephant in the room when we talk about open meeting laws.
Right.
And, or public records requests. And, you know, it's, you know, I guess the challenge for a board, for a town manager, is how do we manage that?
Right.
And, you know, it's costly in terms of, you know, certainly legal cost.
Right.
You know, staff costs.
Right.
And there's probably a cost, and Michael can speak to this, there's a cost to, a morale cost, I would say,
Right.
staff morale cost. So, you know, how do we best manage this? And, you know, when it comes down to, you know, basically one or two individuals that are creating this type of environment.
Right.
And, you know, last night it was interesting. I was on the Board of Health's agenda. I was invited by the chair to report on a project I'm working on. And I had the opportunity to sit and listen to citizen participation. And there was one of the individuals who appears to be the primary purveyor of the open meeting laws and the public records requests, stood up and portrayed himself, or attempted to portray himself as a victim, because he has been served a subpoena in some case that's pending. And it was somewhat unseemly. He attempted to portray himself as a victim, as a target, as being harassed. And so it just seemed to me a disconnect there. And you know, when I look at the scales and I see the impact that he's made in terms of our legal costs, our staff costs, our morale costs, and you know, his attempts to portray himself as a victim here. So, you know, where's the balance?
I would suggest that we put this on the agenda as a separate agenda item, or we're going to run down a rabbit hole and never finish the legal update. So I think it's all valid stuff, but I think it's going to be time consuming, and we're not going to answer that question during the legal update.
Sure. So then the other thing that we've been working on is the warrant. The warrant includes a whole host of things, not the least of which is the real estate purchases we just talked about, the easements. There's some zoning changes. I think you're going to be going through the warrant in a little while. So Jen and Mike and I and the department heads have been working diligently on putting that together, along with, I might add, because this actually goes to Steve's earlier comment, the hard work of all of you who are volunteers, but all of your other volunteer boards who work to make sure that the areas that they have responsibility for are fairly represented and adequately represented and represented up to date. So you'll see changes in general bylaws in here that are put together with our assistance and mostly just review of the Town Forest Committee, the Environmental Committee, I don't think that's the proper name, Sustainability Committee, and so, and the Planning Board. And so those are just, and the CPA Committee. So they're just, those folks work really, really hard to do really good work for the town, and oftentimes are, you know, unduly burdened by thinking that they've done something wrong and in fact haven't. But anyway, so the warrant is full of all kinds of great changes coming forward, I think.
Okay. Is that it?
That's it.
Okay.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lisa.
You're welcome. Is that it?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks again. Okay, next on the agenda is a presentation from Beth Rosenblum, who will discuss the CPC warrant article, which is currently listed as number 9, and is sponsored by CPC.
Do you want this still up?
No.
It's not showing. Not that I have a presentation that I need the screen for, but, and I don't know how to turn it off. I'm just gonna.
It's okay, Beth.
So what?
It's called marketing.
There we go.
Right.
So this is.
Thank you, Beth.
So I'm Beth Rosenblum. I'm the current chair of the Community Preservation Committee, and I represent the Open Space and Recreation Committee on the CPC. And what Lisa just said was really a great segue into what
Put the mic closer to you, that way.
What Lisa Mead just said is really a great segue into what I want to speak about. The CPC is only sponsoring one warrant article for the special town meeting, and it is for capital improvements to the town forest. As we all know, the town forest is nearly 600 acres of undisturbed, undeveloped land, and is quite a unique feature in this region. And we have a town forest committee which is charged under, excuse me, which has very specific charges to manage and steward the town forest. And as you probably know, they don't have a budget. Yet they have an enormous, monumental task to maintain and continually maintain the whole trail system, the signage, and all of that. And the Community Preservation Committee in the past has has gone to town meeting to allow them to seek funds for a parking lot expansion on Winter Street, as well as for some signage and some gates to prevent ATV access into the town forest in prior years. So this year, after several sessions with the Community Preservation Committee and the Town Forest Committee, we have come to an agreement on capital improvements totaling up to $40,050 for very specific items that will be one-time costs, because that's all we're allowed to fund. That's all we can ask the community to fund. Any ongoing maintenance, I'm asking the Board of Selectmen to consider at a later date a budget item for ongoing maintenance for the Town Forest Committee. So, and they may come before you at a later date, but just know that, you know, all we're allowed to fund is capital improvements, one-time funding costs. So we have a warrant article, Article 9, that's in draft form right now because we're still waiting for final approval from Town Council, and it's to see if the town will vote to appropriate up to $40,000 and $40,050 in Community Preservation Act recreation funds to allow the Town Forest Committee to complete a series of capital improvement projects in the town forest. The improvements will include establishing trail access from the town-owned Oak Street property. As you know, we acquired that property several years ago. Installation of bridges, kiosks, and signage. Creation of a 5-car parking area off of Oregon Road, where we don't have any access off of Oregon Road currently. Purchase of trail supplies and an all-terrain utility vehicle, and a construction of a utility shed to house tools and the ATV in a safe environment. And that to meet this appropriation, the sum of up to $40,050 be transferred from the Community Preservation Fund General Undesignated Reserve Account balance with the following stipulations: that the Town Forest Committee enter into a grant agreement with the Community Preservation Committee, that the Town Forest Committee obtain all required town board and town department permits and approvals prior to the disbursement of any funds, and that any ongoing funding for maintenance of the town forest shall not be provided by the Community Preservation Act and must be sought elsewhere. And with any unexpended funds as of June 30th, 2021, being returned to their funding sources, or pass any vote or take any action thereon. So we went through a series of vetting with the committee to really guarantee that what we were agreeing to fund was eligible for funding, and we feel that we've come to that conclusion. So does anyone have any
questions or discussion, Steve?
So just a couple, Beth, and very supportive of this. The location of the shed, do you have
I don't think there's been a final designation yet.
Yeah.
I know that there's some preferred locations, but I don't know that the chosen location is confirmed.
And second question, what is the total amount of the general unrestricted, undesignated funds in CPA?
That are available
That are
now?
available currently?
Over $2 million.
Thank you.
This is a recreation project. So we're allowed to fund recreation projects either from the open space stream, funding stream, or from the general.
Right.
And we didn't have a lot left in the open space, so after the river.
Well, we've done a lot of other good projects,
Oh, we have.
right?
And the general fund is for for all of these.
That's
You
right.
You can fund any project through that
Very good.
account. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Any other questions?
I just wanted, so,
Very straightforward, makes sense.
Rob?
I just wanted to, so, the ATV vehicle, and that was, what was the need, what's the need for that? Did they?
Well,
To
they're
chase
gonna,
the
they
other
need,
ATVs out of
Well, that could be, yeah, sure.
they need to, bring in equipment to construct the bridges. And it's, you know, I don't know, 12 miles of trails in the town
Sure.
forest.
And-
And you can't get into the town forest to bring in equipment, without having an ATV.
And has that been, is it kind of been, like, who's gonna oversee and kind of maintain it, and is that the DPW in on this?
I
and-
believe it's gonna be the town forest committee's responsibility.
So the only, I mean, just my only concern is that we're kind of, everybody's kind of has their own equipment now, rather than, I just want to make sure it's managed properly. That is, if there's an ATV, if we have a town, in effect, a town vehicle out there,
Correct.
that at least, it's involved in the rest of our systems in terms of maintenance, or someone looking out for it, or being responsible for it. I mean, the town forest committee, they work hard with a bunch of volunteers.
There's a member of the town
It's,
forest committee.
hold on a
here.
second.
Yeah.
It's really not any different than the Land Stewardship Committee at Warren Woods
Sure.
that has equipment that was purchased with funds that were allocated by the Board of Selectmen, and
Yep.
we're charged with maintaining the woods, but maintaining the equipment as well.
Sure. And I think that's part of what I'm getting at, is we're kind of having all these little disparate groups with their own equipment, and rather than, I guess I'm just thinking that we should also be thinking about how to efficiently manage it. And usually it's kind of a centralized process. A committee here doesn't have their own equipment, and like, what if DPW needs to use an ATV somewhere else? Are they gonna have access to this? Probably not, right?
Well,
So-
they probably could, but you can't take them on road, so you'd have to have a trailer in order to transport it.
I'm just kind of raising these kind of issues. We should be thinking about this, like, so now the town of Ashland's gonna have an ATV. Well, what if we have other uses for it, or,
Well, actually,
you know?
we do have a number of ATVs. The fire department has one, or the police department has one. I think the fire department is looking for one. So the school department has one as well. So they do,
Wow.
I'm not sure, it's a good question. I'm not sure if centralized
Sure.
is necessary in this case here, when you've got these specific locations where that is the intent for the use. I took a hike with Rob St. Germain recently in the town forest, and it was kind of enlightening. I mean, it's a large, as you describe, it's a large space, and he was describing various locations where these upgrades would be made, and without a vehicle of some sort. And it's, there's a ton of work that needs to be done. I mean, Kathy could probably speak to it. It hasn't been done for years, and so.
It's an all-volunteer committee without any budget.
And the other side of this whole thing about the DPW is it takes the burden away from the DPW to have to be the stewards of the town forest or Warren Woods or any of these things. So there is no burden on the DPW, which I see as a positive.
And I think, like, as the last point to make, I mean, we talk about some of our open spaces, and the Ashland Town Forest is probably one of the largest tracts of open spaces that we have, at over 500 acres. So it probably does deserve and merit its own equipment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess so who's gonna make sure the oil gets changed, or?
The town forest committee will be responsible for that.
Okay, I'm just raising the flag that we should institutionalize some of this stuff and have systems in place. Whereas, 1 year they forget to do it, or, that's all. In terms of fleet management and things like that, we should be thinking about that.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Beth.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Beth.
Welcome.
Okay, our next appearance is scheduled for 7:45, and it's about 7:37. So
They're
if
here.
you guys would not mind, I would like to jump to selectmen's appointments and free up some of the people that are here for that.
Oh, yeah.
And under selectmen appointments, we are appointing Richard Maher to the Ashland, and I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong, to the Ashland Housing Authority with an expiration date of 5/14/18. John, are you representing the Housing Authority here? Or? I am. Okay, Mr. Maher,
Yep.
could you come up to the microphone, please?
Just make sure he's got
That's all right. That's good, no problem. Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Richard Maher. I currently live at 45B Park Road. In the spring of this year, Danny Shea, who is a member of the board, asked me to come to some of the meetings because they were down one person and they were trying to fulfill a board, and they've had problems because another board member resigned, and Danny's been out sick, so they've have skipped a couple of meetings. I have some knowledge with the Housing Authority through my sister, who was also a director of a housing authority for 15 years and served on the board at Chatham for 5 more years. I have a business background, and I am open to any questions you gentlemen have for me, or ladies.
And ladies, yep. Any questions for Mr. Maher?
No, it sounds like the...
John is here with me today from
Yeah.
the board, and also Candace has highly recommended me.
Right, yeah, and John articulated the authority's support for your participation, so
Okay.
very good. We appreciate you stepping up, absolutely.
Yes,
Any other?
thank you very much.
That's great, yeah, thank you, because we've had a lot of issues with, consistent membership there, and it's
Right.
great to see people that are putting energy into managing.
One of the other problems they
authority.
had was they went with about 1.5 years without a director, and that
Yes.
caused issues, so
Right.
So,
trying to get it back to a float.
good.
Okay.
Great.
Well,
Well,
thank
thank
you
you.
for
Stepping up.
volunteering.
Thank you, Dick.
And do we have a motion here? Motion to appoint Mr. Maher?
Sure, I move that we appoint Richard Maher to the Ashland Housing Authority with a term to expire on May 14th, 2018.
Second.
Thank you. Is there anything else I have to do?
Get
You'll have
sworn
to
in.
get sworn in.
I have to, is that at
Have
the
to
town
come back.
clerk's office anytime?
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, did
And
we have a
then-
second?
I did.
yes.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that's 5-0.
And then
Very
just a
nice.
reminder, you will have to run for election
Yes, and that'll be in May.
next spring.
May, yeah.
Yes.
I'll
That's
give
not a
you
problem.
something to look forward to.
As a fact, I was gonna run, but then at the time, the state was thinking about mandatory having a resident there, and they couldn't make up their mind, so
Right.
the election came and went.
Okay.
Okay, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Well,
for your
thanks
time.
again.
Thanks for
Thank
stepping
you
up,
very
Dick.
much. Okay, next up, we have a presentation by the Metro West Economic Research Center with Professors Dunn and McRitchie, and I believe Beth Reynolds is going to present them. Is that correct?
The team of Mark is going to
She
do
did.
presentation.
Okay.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure, it's fine.
See ya.
Thank you all so much for taking the time to put this on the agenda. I am excited about this project that we have been working on. I worked very closely with Maureen months ago. I want to say 6 months ago, I think, I approached Merck about doing a project for us where we can evaluate what we have for businesses in town. What's our makeup? We really had no benchmark to go by. We know what businesses are here. I've been working with them for almost 2 years now. But we didn't really have specific data that showed exactly what our makeup of businesses were. So I reached out to Merck because I've done some work with them in the past in my previous job, and I know the quality that they do. And what they are here to do tonight is to present that to you and to the town. We do have some booklets for anybody that would like one. They are in my office after this meeting, but I will hand it over to Maureen.
Thank you, Beth.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Don McRitchie, and I am associated with, as Beth said, the Metro West Economic Research Center at Framingham State University. The research center is also known as Merck, so when you hear me say Merck, that's what I'm talking about. Maureen Dunn, as Beth said, is my co-author on this report, and we got assistance from one of our researchers, James Alimi, who's also a former Merck intern. Founded in 1991, the Metro West Economic Research Center is a regional economic research center. We produce sub-state economic data and analyses, publish and present our findings, and educate our students through a competitive internship program. MERC currently covers about 1/8 of the communities in the state of Massachusetts. One important point before we begin. MERC never takes advocacy positions on any local issues. So if somebody wants to ask us if you should have a split tax rate or anything like that, that's not what we're all about. Instead, we provide data analysis so decision makers like you can be as informed as possible to make good decisions both in the private and the public sectors. Tonight, we'll focus on Ashland's employment, historical trends, your current industrial structure, wages, and your position within the greater Metro West region. We're gonna go through this in as timely a fashion as we can, so we'd appreciate it if you hold.
We have the,
We have the,
Oh, okay.
that'll work.
But there are animations as well.
We're also capable of turning.
So if you would just hold your questions to the end, we would appreciate that. Okay. Home to over 17,500 residents in 2015, Ashland offers a very highly educated and skilled labor force of about 10,450 individuals. Over half of the residents, 25 and older, 59%, have a completed bachelor's degree, much higher than Massachusetts at 40% and twice the US rate. Over 1/4 of the population possesses a graduate or professional degree, higher once again than Massachusetts at 18% and once again more than twice the US rate. Your 2016 annual unemployment rate of 2.8% is well below the state and the nation. But with MBTA commuter rail service and state routes 126 and 135, Ashland offers nearby access to the Massachusetts Turnpike, Interstate 495, and routes 9, 30, and 85. But little was known of the town's industrial structure. The town of Ashland, through the Director of Economic Development, commissioned this MERC report to look specifically at employment. Why? To have a clear factual knowledge of your industrial base, not opinions or perceptions, but hard data, needed to plan Ashland's future economic course based on your specific strengths and vulnerabilities. The Greater Metro West's 13 communities, including Ashland in blue, are shown here. We are a powerful leading-edge economy, home to many industries essential to the state's future: biotech, health, trade, corporate headquarters, R&D institutions, engineering firms, and the like. But our region has had a very volatile history. Since Ashland is part of the larger Greater Metro West economy, and thus influenced by what goes on in that region, it's important that you see how the larger region around Ashland weathered the last 35 years. Here's the dynamic Greater Metro West economy, quite a roller coaster. Greater Metro West employment climbed from 112,400 jobs in 1980 on the left to 189,100 in 2015 on the right, a gain of 76,700 jobs, or 68%. Over this period, we experienced 4 business cycles, with peaks in 1988, 2001, and 2008, along with a new record high in 2015, and with troughs in 1982, 1991, 2003, and 2009. The Greater Metro West economy has been a phoenix economy, as Maureen likes to say. We have repeatedly reinvented ourselves over time. Think transition from General Motors to Genzyme, Bose, those kinds of institutions. And what about Ashland? The bright blue line along the bottom of the graph is Ashland. Clearly, one of the smaller job centers in Greater Metro West. So let's take a look at Ashland's employment history more closely. Ashland employment rose from 3,560 jobs in 1980 to 4,640 jobs in 2015, up 30%, a much smaller gain than Greater Metro West. In the mid-'80s, Ashland employment nearly reached 5,000 jobs before declining shortly thereafter to fewer than 4,000 jobs. From 1995 until 2008, Ashland employment climbed to your historical peak of 5,160 jobs. But employment has not recovered from the Great Recession in 2009 and currently hovers around 4,600 jobs. Jobs create payroll. Payroll is a total cost to employers of workers, including wages and all the benefits at establishments or places of work located in Ashland. How did Ashland payroll perform over the same period? A very different picture here. Total payroll rose sharply from 51 million in 1980 to a record 218 million in 2015, a fourfold gain. So while employment grew slowly, payroll grew faster, reflecting increasing wages for jobs located in the town. However, Greater Metro West, Massachusetts, and U.S. payrolls grew even faster than Ashland's. So let's look at wages. First, an explanation. The average annual wage is not take-home pay. Instead, it is the total payroll paid by employers in the town divided by total employment. So it includes base pay, overtime, annual leave, sick pay, stock options, bonuses, and so on for all of the jobs located in the firm, from the custodian to the CEO. Think of it as the average cost to the employer of a worker. The average wage in blue for jobs located in Ashland increased from $14,300 in 1980 on the left to a record $47,100 in 2015, up 230%. However, average wages in the U.S. in black, the state in red, and Greater Metro West in green grew faster. By 2015, the Ashland average annual wage was 11% below the U.S. average annual wage, 29% below the state average wage, and 36% below the Greater Metro West average wage. In 1980 on the left, Ashland, the U.S., Massachusetts, and Greater Metro West all offered similar wages, around $14,000. In 1980, Massachusetts was not a high-wage state. Then, while wages rose in Ashland over the past 35 years, they did not keep pace with the region, the state, and the nation, which rose faster. And what about the employers paying those wages? How many establishments are located in Ashland? And what is the trend? Every establishment or separate place of work counts as a single establishment, even if several are owned by the same firm. For example, if you had a dry cleaner who had two different locations, that would be two different establishments. The number of Ashland establishments more than doubled, climbing from 170 in 1980 to 440 in 2015, after peaking in 2004. The good news is that Ashland grew its places of work at a 2.7% annual clip, faster than the state, the nation, and Greater Metro West. We noted previously that employment in the town increased by 30% between 1980 and 2015. The fact that the total number of establishments increased even faster suggests that as new establishments opened and older ones closed, the newer ones had fewer employees per place of work. Maureen will talk more about that in a bit. In 2015, 1 out of every 25 establishments in the Greater Metro West region was located in Ashland. What we now know is that Ashland grew more slowly than the region, the state, and nation, in jobs, payroll, and wages since 1980, but added establishments, many small, at a faster rate. Now that we have seen the historical trends, let's look at Ashland today. To summarize the most recent annual data, which is from 2015. Total employment in the town, 4,540 jobs. Total payroll, 218 million, a historical high. Total average wage, 47,100, another record, and the total number of establishments, 440. Shortly after we prepared this report, we received from the data, from the state data on 2016. So looking at that just preliminarily, we see total employment, total payroll, and the number of establishments all increased in 2016, while the average wage fell slightly. Okay. Now that we know something about the total number of jobs, Maureen's going to take over and talk about where those jobs are.
Thank you, Don. Slide these under here. Okay. NAICS is the North American Industry Classification System that divides businesses and all their jobs into 11 supersectors based on the process used at a place of work. It's how employment data for all of North America is done. This is the NAICS system. It's important to know that all jobs in one establishment or place of work, such as a hospital, from the CEO down to the orderly and nurse, would be classified into the education and health supersectors in yellow under health services. So let's look at Ashland's 4,640 jobs by supersector. By the variety of colors you can see in the graph up there, you can see or immediately see this economy is diverse. And by the way, that's a very good finding. Starting at 12 o'clock, natural resources and mining is just a line because there's no jobs cited there for Ashland. Brown is construction. 7% of all jobs in Ashland. You can think Fafford Real Estate Construction, Bruin Corporation, for example. In red is manufacturing. And this is your second largest super sector with 16% of all jobs. Varian Medical, Terumo Cardiovascular Systems would be in this category. Green is the big trade, transportation, and utilities at 23%, your largest super sector. That includes wholesale and retail trade, transportation, and utilities, but there are none located here. Market basket, Durham School Services would be here, Jamie Oil. Retail trade is the biggest portion there. In pink, you can see information services. This is software and publishing. It's very, very tiny in Ashland. Beige is financial activities, banks, real estate, investment houses. Insurance is also extremely small in Ashland. Blue is professional and business services. It's the third largest super sector with about 15% of your jobs. This super sector includes professional, scientific, and technical firms. Basically a lot of R&D plus like legal and accounting specialty firms. Corporate headquarters and administration and waste services firms. Kitty North America, on-process technology, Worcester Air Conditioning are all in this super sector. The yellow is private education. I just want to stress that it's not public education. It's private education, and health services is small. It's only about 5%. Pincushion, Montessori, Brandolini Residential Treatment Center, Charles River Medical would be in here. Purple is leisure and hospitality. This is accommodation and food service, arts and entertainment. Hotels, your Dunkin' Donuts, Stone's Public House, Sunnyside Cafe would be here. Orange is kind of a catch-all, other services, the Chamber of Commerce, churches, International Society of Fire, for example, would be here. And finally, public is all public, federal, state, and local. Jobs located or cited in Ashland. It's about 14%. The big four for Ashland are manufacturing, professional business services, trade, transportation, utilities, and public combined to produce about 2/3 of all your jobs. So the good news is your economy is diverse. All your eggs are not in one basket. And now it's important to look at Ashland versus the Commonwealth. Looking at Ashland on the left and Massachusetts employment on the right, side by side, shows how different local and state employment patterns can be. Ashland's big players, with 2/3 of the job, are trade, transportation, and utilities, manufacturing, professional business services, and public. On the right, the state's largest super sectors, with about 2/3 of the state jobs, are education and health, trade, transportation, and utilities, professional and business services, and public. A quite different ranking. Ashland has twice the concentration of manufacturing jobs compared to Massachusetts, but a much smaller education and health share compared to the state. Other Ashland super sectors with employment shares larger than the state's are construction, trade, transportation, and utility, leisure and hospitality, other services, and public. Your economy is not the same as the state, and that is true of most towns across the Commonwealth. So it's important that when you base local decisions that you base them on town data. Ashland payroll totaled $218 million in 2015. 5 super sectors generated more than $20 billion in payroll each. Manufacturing, the second largest employer-led, top payroll producer, followed by professional business services, trade, transportation, and utilities, and construction and public. They produce 3/4 of Ashland's payroll. Of these 5 super sectors, all except TTU produced a larger share of payroll and employment. For example, look at manufacturing. This super sector had 16% of the jobs, but 22% of the payroll. The result is a higher than average wage in manufacturing. So let's look at the wages by super sector to see how they compare. In 2015, the average annual wage for a job located in Ashland was $47,100, well below the state's average wage you see in red. You can see most super sectors in Ashland pay less than the state's average wage overall. 2 Ashland super sectors, however, construction at $70,000 and manufacturing at $68,000 led, exceeding the state average wage. And 1/4 of your jobs, about 23%, are in those 2 super sectors. Wages in 4 more super sectors were below Massachusetts, but did exceed $50,000 per year. Information, financial activities, professional business services, and the public. And they account for about 1/3 more of the town's jobs. The remaining super sectors all had wages below $38,000, with the lowest average wage found in leisure and hospitality at $19,500, less than 1/3 of a construction wage. This is the wage gap you hear about in the press. It is very real in Ashland as it is in other places. A person who's holding waitress, leisure and hospitality jobs, they're part-time, no benefits, you'd have to hold 3 of them to equal 1 construction firm wage. Okay, these are all individuals in the, working here, often in the same community, with very, very different wages. So let's look at the establishments that pay these wages. How many are there in each super sector, and how big are they? Ashland was home to 440 establishments, separate places of work, in 2015. Over half of them were only in 3 super sectors: professional business services, trade, transportation, and utilities, and construction. Another 3, education and health, other services, whoops, I just jumped here, and leisure and hospitality were home to another 140 firms. Okay, so if you're in business-to-business marketing, you're selling from one business to another, these are all your customers right up here. Okay. Please note that manufacturing and public, both very large employers in Ashland, had only 20 establishments each. Okay. But the number of establishments is not the whole story. Looking at the number of jobs per establishment reveals a different picture. Okay. The manufacturing and public super sectors have significantly more jobs per place of work than any of the others, just dwarfs the other super sectors. The average manufacturing firm has 40 jobs. Think of a small manufacturing facility, and this is it. They may have multiple shifts, and all the jobs are located at a single site. The number of jobs per establishment in the public sector is similar. Think the high school, town hall. Lots of jobs are concentrated in places, which means if one of these firms leaves, that you have a larger impact on the town than if a smaller firm leaves from one of the other sectors. But the remaining places of work are very small. In all of the super sectors, the number of jobs per establishment is below 15. And similarly, the way to think of that, though, is professional business services had 100 establishments, but each place averages only 7 jobs, okay? So you have many, many small businesses in Ashland, okay? Similarly, if you look at construction, important because of its payroll, okay, and its average wage, there's 60 construction firms in Ashland, but each one averages only 6 jobs per firm. Overall, Ashland establishments averaged only 11 jobs per place of work, much lower than the regional average of 17 and the state and national averages of 14. It's something to think about in terms of economic development. Smaller businesses may need different services or different types of public assistance than a very large corporation that parks someplace. As they grow, these smaller firms, you would want to encourage them to stay within Ashland, especially the ones that are higher wage firms. So you have to give some thought. You know, they may stay at this size, but if they grow, you want to stay here. And given your highly educated labor force, Ashland may want to encourage more small businesses in high-wage super sectors. For example, legal, accounting, IT-type consulting firms. These are all also small. Generally speaking, some of these firms are small right across the state, but you have a higher number located in Ashland. Information software, firms involved in financial transactions, for example, they're often very relatively small offices with less than 10 per firm. And finally, where does Ashland fit within the greater Metro West region? Let's look at employment by community. These are the 13 communities, leading, of course, the big dominant communities: Framingham, Marlboro, Westboro, Natick. At Merck, we call it the Big Four when we're dealing with Greater Metro West. The remaining 9 communities, including Ashland, have fewer number of jobs, and in some cases are decidedly more residential than commercial, a deliberate choice in many cases by these communities. For Ashland overall, Ashland ranks 11th out of the Greater Metro West communities in employment, payroll, and the number of establishments, and last in average wage. Our conclusion after, we didn't cover everything in the book, there's many additional pages, but our conclusions was Ashland has experienced historically slow growth in employment, payroll, wages over a very prolonged period, 35 years. However, you have a very diverse industrial structure. A single firm coming or going will not be entirely disruptive to the community. Trade, transportation, and utilities, professional business services, manufacturing, and surprise to us, construction, okay? And the public are leaders within your industry structure. You have many, many small businesses. And a singular asset that I think you need to leverage, this is my opinion, not the official opinion of Merck, is your very highly educated labor force. Okay. We would like to thank Beth and the town of Ashland for the opportunity to prepare this report on Ashland employment. Our goal was to provide you with a clear factual knowledge of your industrial base. We hope that your residents, businesses, and public officials will use this knowledge to be stewards of your town future. We would also like to invite you to the Merck Conference. We have an annual Merck Conference every May. Generally speaking, it's at Framingham State University. At that conference, we release the giant data book on the Greater Metro West region. It's like this report, but like 90 pages of it. If you're a data junkie, it's your mother's ship. But you know, we would certainly invite your municipal and business leadership to come. And I would strongly suggest it. As part of that conference, we identify which sectors are growing in which direction, okay, in the overall Greater Metro West economy. So, questions?
Thank you, Professors Dunn and McRitchie. Any questions or comments? Yeah, Steve?
So just a couple questions.
Sure.
Establishment.
Yes.
It's defined as a location as opposed
Exactly.
to, how about a tradesman that operates out of his home?
If he pays unemployment comp, is part of his business practices.
So
He's an
that's
establishment of,
one, or if he does have he hires individuals,
Oh,
but
yeah,
he runs it
exactly.
out of his home, that's counted as
Yes,
establishment.
exactly.
Okay, fine.
yes.
So my second question is, this is not in the scope of what you've presented tonight, but how would we, how would you recommend as economists to the town to get some concept of, how a particular business, has a multiplier effect within our just general economic activity? So you take just for the sake of conversation, an organization like Fenwell. I don't know, Fenwell might be the biggest employer in town, I don't know. But, how do other businesses in Ashland benefit from Fenwell's employment? How do we measure that? How do we find out what that impact may or may not be?
It's very difficult to have a multiplier off an individual firm. I guess that's the first piece. But on the other hand, it's any firm located, small and large. A larger one may have more impact depending on whether they're buying their services locally. Are they buying them from within the town, or are they buying them from somewhere else? You can have a corporation in your town, but if the cleaning service is coming from, I don't know, I'm just picking random towns.
Sure. Yep.
And they're all funneling in and then leaving, you may have some of the benefits of wages and people eating lunch out in firms like that, but you may have very little in the corporate income, the corporate property taxes and pieces like that. But for an individual firm, unless the firm is very large, it'd be very difficult to, you can measure it through some of the parameters like property tax and individuals like that, but the multiplier throughout the town, I think, would be difficult to do.
Yeah, and it's also, in some situations, difficult from the data that we use to get information about individual firms.
Very important.
Because the way the data are published, there's an effort made to mask any data where you could, for example, I live in Hopkinton. Okay. We all know who the big player is there, but when you look at the employment data, you see a little C, which is classified. They do that whenever they feel that publishing the number of jobs would clearly identify a specific firm. So that makes it a little difficult. And plus, they stick in C's randomly in other places just to mess us up.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
Yolanda?
Of the total employment in town, do you have any way of knowing, and I think you just answered my question, of those jobs that are in town, how many of them are filled by Ashland residents?
No.
No.
No, so there's no indicator as to who the employees are, only the employment.
Right. It's important to realize that when you see unemployment data and labor force, that's all based on the residents who live. They may work anywhere in the Northeast, but their domicile, residential domicile, is Ashland. Employment data is jobs. It's extremely accurate. Unlike, by the way, the unemployment survey. Unemployment data is a survey. This is headcount. Every firm involved in this is paying unemployment comp to the state and the federal government, and they go to great lengths down to the last job because they're assessed on every one of these. So it's extremely accurate data. Yes.
And then I have two statements because they're, as I looked at this and I read it,
Yeah.
a lot of it made sense if you look at the kind of businesses that we have. When
Yes.
we're looking at the total income, we have a lot of places like Dunkin' Donuts and Honeydew and places where you have kids coming in who are getting paid minimum wage because it's their first job, so that makes sense. And then the other point I wanted people to make is as they're looking at this is the jobs in town.
Yes.
This is not the average salary of people in town because our average salary is almost twice what you have here as our average job. So
as we were looking through the 13 Greater Metro West communities, in our conference book we always have this graph as well. One of the things we do is compare the number of jobs in the town to the number of residents. And you can we break down communities into either importers of labor or exporters of labor. And there are, I think, 6 towns out of the 13 that are exporters of labor.
And Ashland is one of them.
And
Yes.
Ashland is one of them.
Right.
Yeah.
And, you know, as Maureen suggested, that is probably at least partly by choice. This is the
Right.
type of community. So,
Yeah.
Right.
so a lot of people that live here are earning big salaries by going to Framingham or Natick or
Or
Boston or
Boston,
wherever.
right. Okay, that was all, thank you.
Okay.
So-
Michael?
I just had a couple questions.
Sure.
Thank you again for your presentation.
Yeah.
I thought it was very informative. So the two sectors that had the highest average wage would be construction and manufacturing.
Yes,
Um,
skilled trade, not surprising, skilled
Okay.
trades.
Does
And
that
then-
take into account things like overtime, or is it
Yes,
just
all
strictly
those,
base
every-
wage?
If you remember when Don went through it,
Yeah.
it's overtime, stock options,
Okay,
any sick leave
Bonuses.
annually, bonuses.
okay.
Yeah.
So my second question is, compared to the rest of Metro West,
Yeah.
is this a similar, is this similar to what you see in other Metro West towns where construction and manufacturing would be significantly higher than some of the other?
I would say the overall super sectors, some are virtually identical, like leisure and hospitality. They're around 20. Region-wide, that's like 20. To me, that's where you see the greatest disparity, because you have significant numbers of people who are, you know, it's a great first job if you're trying to support a family on it.
Not
It's,
so much.
It's not-
no, I mean, and we do, and this is why you see, you know, kids in the same classroom with dramatically different households. But to answer, I just lost the thread of your question for a second. Oh, the average, overall, and you could see it from the, I'll leave you the book, the conference booklet, wages are high, that's why you have a higher average wage, significantly higher in Greater Metro West, because we have some industry, life sciences, trying to think, the industry in the town next door.
Framingham, I mean, they have a lot
Oh, yeah,
of
but no, I was going the
high-
other way
and-
to,
yeah, and
Hopkinton.
we're not supposed to name firms because the data they've
Right.
gone. We all know who they are, but if you go 2 towns this way, and, you know, you can figure it out very quickly. But manufacturing tends to be a high flyer. Professional and business services is something as you move forward. That's a very high wage super sector. Professional, scientific, technicals, because it includes, you know, firms very similarly sized to what you have here, 6, 7, 8 accountants, legal services. And then another high wage is financial, much higher than, that's where I'm seeing some of the bigger disparities with Ashland. And they're in all the other towns here, so it's something to think about.
How can we get them to our town?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, we don't tell you the how, we just give hints.
That's Beth's job.
Yeah. But it's not, you
And
know.
ours as well, but.
It's gonna be another unemployment, we'll let that happen.
Yeah.
On the back of the report, at the bottom, is the URL for the Merck webpage. And I believe that our conference booklet from last year is available for download there.
Okay, great.
Yeah, that's for them, yeah.
Carl, can I ask?
I brought this.
We also have a biannual newsletter, and we gave a huge stack to Beth to distribute to whoever wants
All
them.
right.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, thank you for this interesting presentation on basically jobs located in Ashland.
Yes.
I guess, so what what's the big takeaway here is, as public officials, we look at quality of life and really, our commercial tax base here is not what we'd like it to be. But that's not directly linked to, what kind of job is located here, or, so what is our, a lot of people in Ashland buy nice homes here and they work in Hopkinton at EMC. I mean, so, and EMC is not moving here because we're not on 495. So, yeah, so, but, so what exactly should we be looking at with this information? As I think people were getting at, we're a net exporter of jobs. And, we want to have a better commercial tax base. We've identified that as an issue. For example, if we redevelop the Sears Plaza, and depending on what moves in there, but, it's likely, even if it gets well developed, it'll probably be retail, relatively low job salaries for the same kinds of statistics we're seeing now. Should we be concerned? Do we not want retail? Would we rather have, you know, high tech or finance there, and would that make a big difference in terms of the issues that we have to deal with as public officials? You know, I guess that's what I'm trying to get at.
But they said that they're giving us the information, they're not telling
Our
us
job
how.
is
Well,
to
but-
decipher and do something with it.
Yeah, but you get my point here.
Yeah.
You know, we haven't been focused on employment, and the question is, should we? And, you know, Beth's commissioned you to do this benchmark on employment, and I'm like, we know everybody works out, 2/3 of the people work out of town and some of them have high-wage jobs in Boston, Natick, you know, on the 495 corridor, you know, so that's what we're dealing with, and how do we use this information, or do we to be concerned about that or not? That's what, you know.
Michael?
I think you hit upon an interesting point when you talk about the Sears location.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to, just speaking for myself, I think it'd be hard to see something other than retail go in there. But given that there you do have a lot of small businesses and professional business services, things like that, I think it's a question of matching up the resources in the town to some of those types of jobs. An accounting firm, as Maureen said, you know, an IT firm or something like that. Are there locations in the town where a small business of 5, 6, 7 people could move in and operate successfully?
And we think that'd be a better impact than another retail operation?
Well, in terms of wages, certainly.
In terms of wages?
Oh, yeah.
But,
Without-
okay,
without
which is
question.
good for the people there.
Yeah.
I'm just, as a public
Yeah.
official, and concerned about the tax base
Yeah.
and services in should I be very concerned one way or the other?
I think communities make choices. We've had communities within Greater Metro West move sharply away from business when a major firm has left to go elsewhere. In engineering, I'm trying to think. But anyway.
No, we can't say.
Yeah, you can't say. Yeah, but then, you know, but all of a sudden the shift began to hit residential property taxes more. I mean, you know, we've had many experiences. Merck has been in business since 1991, and, you know, we've seen massive exoduses out of this region and try to regrow the economy, which gets into some of your issues. I think you do have to be proactive to a degree, because every year businesses fail. Not just, you know, it's just what happens.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to have some waiting in the wings or thinking about taking it over. So you do want to, and we call it churning, you know, so you do want a modest amount of that and think about it. And what I, you know, and so what I also think about when you're talking smaller businesses, you're not talking like a whole giant strip mall or anything like that. You're talking like maybe a 1 or 2 story building that could be renovated, renovated and become a medical consultant, legal firm, accounting firms,
IT.
IT, and, you know, these, because many of the firms in Metro West have subcontractors. That's been a big concern when a very large tech firm may leave the region. It's not simply the firm and the thousands and thousands of jobs at an individual firm. It's the fact that all their subcontractors are in all the other communities. You know, you have the firm here. What we saw sadly, because we documented extensively the 1987, 1993, the real Great Recession for Massachusetts was those years. You know, devastating loss of the Bank of New England. What was, you know, Prime, Data General, you know, firm after firm. But then with that was the second wave of all the subcontractors that worked for it. That's why it was so long. You had the first ones going, and then it rolled, you know. So, and then the other resources are chambers of commerce, you know, participating more when you hear, you know, firms that are looking for, you know, people might really like to be local rather than commute into Boston every day. Okay, you know, if you're in a profession.
And working close to home has its benefits.
It does.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, man,
I
I've had a
guess-
family member give up a job because it was ending up to be almost 2 hours
Right,
on a
with
bad
the
day
regional
each way
traffic.
with young children.
Go ahead, Mr. Mignani.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Professor Dunn, thank you. I really appreciated your comments a few moments ago when you answered some of our concerns and questions. Ashland, historically, and I'm sure you'll agree, is that we are the sons and we're paying for our father's sins over the last 45 years. Ashland is already being considered by some of the town fathers that sat where we're sitting years ago as bedroom community, and never really entertained the fact or even shut the door on other businesses coming into this community when there were venues available.
Yeah.
So we're feeling those effects. We had several businesses. The 200 Homer Ave building, I'll use as an example, was the Telecom building.
Yeah.
And there were many employees there, and a lot of them were Ashland-based employees. You know, they lived and moved in this area as a result of that. Well, you know, over the years, labor costs were extremely high.
They left.
And they went down south.
Yeah.
They went south during that time frame
Yes.
that you were referring to. We've had a lot of mom and pop stores in town that were thriving. And then for whatever reason, over the 20 years that they were in existence, finally had to shut down because there was the decline. We started, and I know the Ashland Business Association promoted many businesses. You know, Shop Ashland First, you know, Buy Ashland, Ashland #1. I mean, there was all these promotional programs going on to get the townspeople and even others, you know, locally to come in and shop Ashland. And it's, to this day, we're still doing it, thanks to the efforts of Beth and the Ashland Business Association. I mean, it's starting to take its effect, but like you said moments ago, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes a period of time for this to happen. And in the meantime, I know with the efforts of Beth and management team here and folks on this board, we're trying to promote new businesses to come into town, show them what's available. Matter of fact, Framingham State University,
Yes.
for that matter.
Change your stats.
You know,
You now
and I was
have a
looking,
new-
and I was looking at that 2% hospitality. Wait a minute, you just bought our hospitality. You know, how does that not come
You have
into
an
play?
office that-
Right, so I'm saying, so let's get that moving up there.
Yeah.
But seriously, all in all, I mean, I appreciate the presentation. It makes us think, but believe me, we've been fighting this battle for a number of years, and hopefully with Beth and this additional information, it'll give us some movement. And I appreciate all your efforts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So, next on the agenda is our consent agenda. Do I hear, does anybody want to take any items off the consent agenda for discussion?
I actually, if I may, I just have a question.
You gotta remove it.
I would say, so can I, actually, I want to remove them both.
A and B?
Because I do have some questions with respect to the permit and the dividend funding from the
Okay.
recycling.
So we'll remove items A and B from the consent agenda, really just leaving the item C, the declare surplus the Department of Public Works golf cart. So do I have,
I move that we approve the consent agenda containing just item C.
Thank you.
second?
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So it's unanimous. I'll turn it back over to the chair.
Okay, do you want to address, Michael, do you want to address
I don't know what the questions are.
consent agenda A?
Recycling dividends issues.
It's the seven.
Sure, so we've been awarded through the
Thank you,
Massachusetts
folks.
Department of Environmental Protection as recycling dividends funds in the amount of $7,700 under the Sustainable Materials Recovery Program. What it does is it provides payments to municipalities that have implemented specific programs and policies that have been proven to maximize reuse, recycling, and waste reduction. So it's good work on behalf of DPW generally and Dave Miller specifically for all the work that he does with our stuff.
Oh, and that's not the fact that I asked it to be removed. I just had a question as to where this money is going to be utilized. Is it going to go into lowering maybe the trash fees for seniors, or for the purchasing of trash-free bags for the senior citizens? Is that something that this money could be used for, or is it already slated, or is it earmarked for something else with respect to the contract itself?
It actually goes back into the trash fund. So,
Okay. All right, and that could help utilize maybe lowering the trash fees for seniors if necessary?
At $7,700, it'd be very, very tough, but that would certainly factor into the equation of anything that we decide to
Okay,
do.
well, that's 77 more than we had to begin with before that.
Yeah, how does it work? So there's a separate fund for the recycling and all the fees associated with that?
Yeah, we have a separate line item for
Yeah, I'm trying to remember.
recycling.
That's good. So this is, it's good news.
Oh, it
I'm
is,
glad
right,
you guys
yeah,
are getting it, and, I don't know if there's other ways of getting more. This seems to be very formulaic, but.
It's based on a point, and it's based on households served, I believe.
So I had a question on that, because as you go through the points, we have a yard waste program, so where we collect, if you look at how they gave us the points, we have a yard waste program. Why didn't we, I would ask, why didn't we get points for that? Or we have our bulky item program. Why didn't we get points for that? How they determine these points would be a question. I mean, for next year, I'm sure at this point they can't do any more, but what do we need to do to be able to get points for these things?
Good question.
Yeah, I think, and I've raised.
Textile bonus points. We have the new textile program. Though, when was this?
Oh, yeah, textile too.
So this
When was this done?
So this was based,
It's a new award, right?
Yeah.
So it's based
But
on
it's
the
when
past.
is it based on? Our textile program didn't start until
the
July.
last fiscal year.
Okay, so fiscal year 17. Okay.
I think, I guess my thing is I think it'd be a good idea to have either Dave or Doug come in here and talk about our recycling and in general and all these kinds of issues and where the market's going. I've just heard that China's is making plans to not accept as much recycled material from the United States, and all those things are going to affect us. It'd be good to have some sort of update in what these guys see as trends happening.
Yeah, definitely. I think later in maybe the year or the fiscal year, I think it probably would be a good idea for them both to come back in and just give you an update on how things went with the rollout of the carts.
Yeah,
because that was a very
that as
successful
well, yeah.
rollout, and have that discussion.
So this potentially could be even more next year with the programs that we've initiated since.
Potentially,
Right.
potentially.
Yeah. Now, those are the questions that I had, Mr. Chair, so thank you.
All right, so we need a vote to,
I move that we accept the recycling dividends funds in the amount of $7,700.
Second. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that's 5-0. What's your question, Mr. Vignani, on B?
The question on B is, and I had a brief discussion prior to tonight's meeting.
Well, let's read what B is. Approve the parade permit for 2018 Boston Marathon, which will be held April 16th, 2018.
And before we vote on this, and we have another I guess there's gonna be another BAA meeting next month.
I believe it is in November, yes.
Okay. I would like to see that we just hold off on this until we have an opportunity to speak to the Boston Athletic Association, because the monies that we annually get that go to the town, and this is not bib money that I'm referring to, this is the money that comes in to pay for the public safety aspect of it, the DPW aspect of cleaning, preparing the race route through the town, may not be enough to cover the cost of the town. So I'm a little concerned that some of that money is going to come out of our own pockets, and why should it? That's the only reason why I asked it to be taken off the consent agenda. So before,
Makes a point, yeah.
before we make any decision tonight, I would like to make sure that we're on par. I know I'm being a pain in the derriere, but I apologize. I just want to make sure that this is something, and I had, a half paragraph, but I cut it down.
Yeah.
So,
Correct me, Susan, if I'm wrong, but I think historically, the monies we've received have covered the cost because we have put some of the additional funds, the excess funds, into our gift accounts. So if we have some...
This year was the first year, though, that we did not.
Was this the first year?
This was the first year that the check that we received did not cover the
Okay,
expenses. So what I did is I went back historically and looked at since I've been keeping record, all of the money we've received each year and what we have paid out against it, because they used to come back and ask us, okay, in the end, what did you have left? And I think that they did that to every community along the route to try to find what was happening with the money, how much was it costing each of the communities, to, conduct the
Sure.
race that day.
So what was last year? What was the,
I would have
what
to-
we were given as a
I
stipend?
think it was 68,000 we received.
And what did we spend?
I would have to
Yeah,
pull
we'd have
it-
to go back and.
Yeah,
and
I have
look.
to pull it out. So what I did is I actually pulled from the prior years all the rollover that we had, and we expended any rollover that we would have had from prior years, whether you pull it from one bucket or the other, I mean.
Oh, wow. So we're basically at zero right now.
We're at zero.
Yeah.
So we need to make sure, and I would say that we ask Michael to do this, talk to the BAA to increase our amount so that we are not at a loss.
So my plan was this year, since this was the first year where we did not have enough coming in that would cover our expenses, to see what happened in 2018 and to see whether or not 2017 was an anomaly or whether this is actually a trend. And then at that point in time, start addressing, looking to the BAA and starting to increase the amount that they would be giving to municipalities.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, I believe this came up, this became an issue, I think, several years ago, when a previous town manager was here. And it actually got to a point where the town of Ashland was considering not even allowing the BAA to run through town until they, until the BAA upped their amount. We certainly don't want to get to the point where we're having that kind of standoff. Certainly that's no good from a relationship standpoint with anybody. But on the other hand, we've got to make sure that we're covering the costs associated with.
So
putting
you
on this
can
event.
project this year's cost, or 2018 cost, based on last year? And
We should,
whatever bump you need to add?
But
We
they
could
might change
certainly
their
add it, yeah, I
requirements.
think we could certainly, we
Would
could
they
certainly
change the
ask it.
requirements? Every year there seems to be something in terms
Well,
of
the public safety
security.
aspect of
Yeah,
it, Robert,
so-
does, but since the incident had taken place a few years ago, I mean, they've heightened the awareness of public safety. And that money that we're talking about doesn't even entertain the fact that a lot of the public safety officers are asked to go into Boston for many, many meetings throughout the year. And they're on our dime to go to those meetings. So that doesn't cover that cost as well. I just want to make sure we're not shorthanded in any way, shape, or form. That's the reason why I bring it up.
Hold on a second. Have we agreed to the price yet that we're gonna get for this coming
not here,
April?
We're discussing that, I believe, in November,
Correct.
right?
Okay.
But certainly, I can reach out to the other communities and find out if they were put in a similar situation, because they may also want to be part of that discussion.
So, but what we're voting on here is the
Permit.
permit for the marathon. So
What's
we're gonna, are we making a decision here that we're gonna hold that
I think that's what
As-
Joe's recommending, is that we
That's
wait to
basically what I'm
approve the
recommending.
permit until we know that we're gonna get enough money to cover our expenses for the day.
Or at least maybe we get more information.
Well,
you know.
Something to that effect, that's all. I mean, I'm not trying to, I don't want to make it sound like we're trying to blackmail the BAA
Yeah,
in any
right.
way, shape, or form. That's not it. I just want to make sure we have a financial responsibility to the residents in this community, and there's no way in heck that they make millions of dollars in endorsements and sponsorships, and for whatever reason, and,
All
our
right,
expenses should be
then we
covered.
won't vote on it.
That's all.
So that's tabled?
Thank you.
Let's see, old and new business, review, close, and post special town meeting warrant for November 14th, 2017. And, Michael, I'm assuming you're gonna go through the warrant articles, and I would suggest that, if possible, that we at least discuss 9 and
16.
16 first, seeing there's a member of the Town Forest Committee here, if we have any questions for that, and then we can
Sure, so 9.
circle back around.
Circle back around, piggyback on it. So Article 9 is the article that we discussed earlier tonight for the special town meeting warrant, and that is the Community Preservation Committee sponsored article of $40,050 in Community Preservation Act recreation funds for the Town Forest Committee. And I believe Ms. Rosenblum went through and gave a pretty thorough presentation on what that would cover, so do you have any questions related to that?
I actually just have one, because as I've been thinking about this,
Do you have a question for Kathy or for Beth?
for Beth, or for Kathy.
Okay, either one of you, or
Or you
why
can
why don't both of you come to the podium?
We don't bite, you know.
This
Thank
is
you.
a very specific number. Usually we see something not to exceed, you know, it would be like 41,000 or 40,500.
They
I mean,
broke down
Did they
their
really go
costs.
down the
They
details
did.
that well?
They did.
So if something
We
comes
were very
in,
impressed.
so if something comes in over budget, they have no wiggle room? I mean,
Correct.
is that something that should be considered?
We've actually considered that. So
Okay.
we have a retired accountant as one of our members right now. So that person graciously agreed to work on the budget, thank God. So
Okay.
all those pieces have been pretty well vetted.
So you have some wiggle room is my concern.
We have a little wiggle room, enough to account for things, and at a certain point, if we don't, then we'll be coming back and say, guess what? You know, because the price raised, you know, I mean, if something happens and,
Right.
you know, it's like the price of oil and gas, sometimes there's no choice about it. So I'm pretty sure we're pretty good on this.
Okay, for the record, Beth Rosenblum from CPC and Kathy Rooney from the Town Forest Committee here at the podium.
And a follow-up question, not so much regarding this, but regarding budget for the Town Forest Committee. So if this passes, you will now have an all-terrain vehicle that will then need fuel.
It's actually a utility vehicle, because I want to
Okay.
keep, I don't want to use the term all-terrain vehicle, because that suggests recreation, whereas utility vehicle is
Utility vehicle.
specifically
It's a
for the
utility vehicle.
A
utility.
utility vehicle
Similar to
that will
the
then
high
need
school
fuel,
has the athletic director.
which means we'll
Correct.
have to look at putting some money in a budget for them to be able to purchase fuel in the future, correct?
Or have them be available to get it at the depot.
At the depot, okay, okay.
Gas
So-
can and bring it down.
That budget item is on my list to work
To
on.
talk to, okay,
To sort that out and work out some of the
okay.
pieces and parts
That was
about.
the only thing I just got, okay, that
And
was
then
it.
Article 16 is to amend Chapter 153 of the Town of Ashland bylaws, which is related to the Town Forest Committee. And I believe in your warrant, you see what the changes are. Any crossed-out language is language that is to be omitted in the future, and underlined in bold text is actually new language. And as you see, most of it is basically adding some clarifiers that things need the permission of the Ashland Town Forest Committee, and also it looks like some grammatical changes and just some clarifying language. Any questions related to that? All right.
Okay, everybody's good?
Yeah.
Good.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you, Kathy.
Thank you very much.
And Kathy,
Thanks
while
for
you're at
staying.
the podium, I know that you have to leave, and it was going to be in my board report. I just wanted to thank you very much for all the work you did down at the Living Wall this
Yes.
weekend.
Oh, yeah.
Much
You're welcome,
appreciated.
my
Thank you.
pleasure. We got a lot of comments from people, both brand-new residents in town and people who've been around for years, who've been agitating apparently to have downtown revitalized, and they all came up and said, thank you, it looks great, so we're thrilled.
Okay.
Well, good
So-
luck, and hopefully it's
Thank you.
successful. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
All right. So circling back around to Article 1. Again, this is for the special town meeting warrant for those of you that are listening. That's going to be held on Tuesday, November 14th, 2017, starting at 7 p.m. In the high school auditorium. Article 1 is actually here, report of town manager. What I'm going to do is give an update on some of the initiatives that were passed at the last town meeting, and give an update on things like the MWRA connection and the Riverwalk project.
So this, because this used to read here board reports, so there are no boards that want to give reports, so we're gonna hear a report from you instead.
Correct.
Thank you.
So, Article 2 is free cash allocations. Now, this one is going to get a little bit of detail, or we're going to get into a little bit of detail. You received notification from DOR last week that our free cash certification for FY17, or FY18, I should say, is $1,670,000. So According to our free cash policy, we split that up into 3 different buckets. The first being the general stabilization or rainy day fund. So I'm happy to say that we only need to appropriate $400,000 this year, because at that point we would have reached our goal of 10% of our general fund budget in our stabilization fund, which is quite an accomplishment when you consider 4 years ago we were actually at 4%. So
Very good.
based on our financial policies we've made, and adhering to them, we've made good practice, or good progress. That means we'll also be able to put more money into our OPEB trust, or OPEB stabilization account. I will get into the particulars of those later, but we would be looking at putting in over $300,000 towards OPEB from free cash. The next 3 items fall under the bucket that we have outlined in our financial reserve policies that say either capital items or other one-time expenses. So first was we would be putting in over $300,000 for capital. The first bucket, if you will, being towards projects that we deferred at our Springtown meeting to the fall when we did get free cash. That includes paving projects and then also police vehicles. We also have new projects in capital that we would be funding. These are projects that have come on the capital list since we did our capital plan. One would be engineering for lights on Route 126 as part of the Route 126 project. And then also the engineering for new boilers at one of the schools and also Town Hall as well. We've started having boiler issues here in town.
We only have one boiler in town, is that correct? In the town building itself?
We have 2.
We have 2 in the town hall?
Yeah, they're residential.
Residential.
Oh, okay.
Residential.
So then, yeah.
So that would be capital. Then we have two items that we are funding as they are one-time expenses. So the first is Cadillac paint. We'll be asking for $285,000 to finish the remediation of Cadillac paint, and that includes the demolishing of the buildings that are currently there, and then also cleaning up the soil that is currently contaminated there and replacing that with clean soil. It also is funding in there for Novus Engineering to provide oversight of those services and then provide the final reports necessary to close that up with DEP. Certainly this is something that we've talked about in the community for a couple of decades now, so the ability to finally get it over the goal line here is a huge, huge accomplishment. I do have Novus Engineering finalizing estimates, but we chose the high end of the estimates to come up with this $285,000 figure, so we feel comfortable with that. Second is actually as part of the school committee's goals and the school superintendent's goals. One of the things that they wanted to look into was funding full-day kindergarten, free full-day kindergarten for future generations here, or future kids here in town. That is an ongoing cost that they are going to assume within their budget, but they do need to have a one-time infusion of cash that would help them get that program set up. And so that would be $250,000 of one-time cash. I know there's still some outstanding questions related to kindergarten, and I think we're going to have a more thorough discussion either at liaison committee or maybe at a future meeting, but
yeah, I think before the town takes that on.
It needs to happen before town meeting. I mean, and not only at liaison, but here, I think, you know, or we need to have some kind of public hearing on that.
Okay.
I think.
Okay.
Would that come under the school committee's purview for that public hearing?
Well, it's a budgetary item, so I would think that.
But it falls under their budget though, right?
No,
It does.
It's coming out of our free cash.
So the money is coming out of free cash, and it would be appropriated to the school department budget. So once it gets into their school department budget, they have the authority to spend it the way that they desire, meaning the school committee. Where the Board of Selectmen and the FinCom have discretion over this is, you know, what is recommended at town meeting. And I can say the FinCom has been supportive of this. We discussed it at our last FinCom meeting. What I would suggest is if you have some outstanding questions, if you could send those to me, I can send those directly to Jim.
I think that sounds more in term, there seem to be concerns related to logistics more than anything, if that's fair, if that's a fair point.
I guess my question, have they been discussing and vetting this idea of moving to full-day kindergarten and looked at the budget impact?
For years, they issued a report 4 years ago that recommended moving towards full-day kindergarten.
Yeah, they've talked about it for years.
Yeah, and it's...
Well, I know it's been kicked around for a while. I guess I didn't realize it was actually this concrete, and they're about to implement it.
I think that's for me the thing too, is that I know they've been talking about it, and so.
And I think, you know, we talk about it, and we're talking about it now in this context within financial terms or in financial conditions, but I think really, if we look at the values and everything that we're trying to espouse as a community, this goes to about issues of equity. It goes to issues of making sure that everybody has the opportunity, or every kid has an opportunity.
Well, I guess that's what I was getting at. Have they done these kind of general policy kind of meetings and forums? I just hadn't heard of it. Now that
I believe they even had a task force related to it. I believe it was. It wasn't that long ago.
So do they not need to put anything into the special education bucket?
No, they're capped.
Okay.
Remember, we capped that at 600,000. They actually have a little bit over that now that some of the interest and the earnings have come into that.
And so they found a way to, in the long term, take it as part of their budget in terms of the current percentage allocation. Is that?
Yeah, I mean,
other than this one-time.
And that was the discussion. They understand that free cash is to be used for one-time purposes, and so that, and the way it works is that you start free full-day kindergarten. You don't get funding through the Chapter 70 formula for those kids that you're bringing on board. So that first year, you have to eat the entire cost associated with funding full-day kindergarten. The next year, you start getting Chapter 70 money for those kids that are part of your free full-day kindergarten program. Still, it's not enough to cover all of the expenses, but the superintendent and the school committee have discussed how they can absorb that within their budget moving forward, and that they have made a commitment to doing that, and it's because it's one of their priorities.
So is it possible to get, we have, our next meeting is November 1st, I believe. Is it possible to have Jim come in and just have a discussion on this, or have a presentation from Jim?
Sure.
As to, you know, what they've pursued.
That's a great idea.
Sure. And I think it would be good, like that report that came out, I think it'd be good to get that to you ahead of time.
Yeah.
And I think I've talked to him, recently, and, I think he's pretty articulate with the rationale behind full-day kindergarten, and I'm sure you appreciate this as well, relative to, the value at young ages of having those opportunities. So it'd be good to have him here and really articulate it.
If I may, Mr. Chair, going to a full-day kindergarten, they are actually losing some financial resources, aren't they? Because isn't it right now, aren't they getting some sort of tuition stipend for the kids that are in kindergarten now?
Well, that's what the whole question is, right? In that right now, if you want to do full-day kindergarten, you're paying to do that. So the first year that they decide to do this, they lose that income.
Right.
So, but from what Michael is saying, then on the second year, you then start getting Chapter 70 money for those kids,
So
which
it's
will
a
not be
hit
the
for 1 year.
same amount, because,
Right.
I mean, no way near will it meet.
Right, so 1 year hit, but they're willing to absorb that 1 year hit.
Well, no, it'll be longer than 1 year.
No, the 1 year hit that they get nothing coming in.
So the free,
Right.
like the free cash appropriation helps buffer that.
Right.
that free,
I didn't get that.
So if you have financial concerns about it, I think it's something that.
Yeah, if we could have Mr. Adams in,
Yeah,
because I think, I think the school committee might have talked about it and people who are paying attention to schools, but I think it would be good for the community to hear the reasons, the advantages, and how they're going to absorb it, so that in 3 years, they don't come back saying we need more money,
Right.
and one of those reasons is full-day kindergarten. So I think that has to be part of the discussion. I mean, I support it, but we need to make sure it's, that the community is financially able to support it long-term.
Okay. All right, Article 3 is the transfer of OPEB stabilization.
So that's it for the capital?
Yeah,
items?
sorry, that's it for free cash.
All right, and okay. Can you give us a list of this, or is that part of what we're gonna be getting? Your what you just read out to us?
Yeah, so now that we have, once the board decides to close the warrant, we can start putting together the motions and the recs together. We still might have a couple of holes, especially related to Article number 5, which I'll get to.
Okay.
But we can start filling those in. Article 3 is the transfer of the OPEB stabilization fund balance to OPEB trust. We have made the decision to close out the stabilization fund and move the funding over to the trust. There's really no purpose in having two vehicles for OPEB right now, number one. Number two, the benefit of having all the funding into the trust is it allows us to assume a higher rate of return on our actuarial valuations. So that's helpful as well. Mm-hmm. It looks like when all is said and done, we will have close to $2 million in the OPEB trust after this. So
That's pretty damn good considering we didn't have.
Yeah, consider we didn't have, I don't think, anything 5 years ago.
And then will we have to vote to close the stabilization fund, or no?
No, we can just,
Okay, we can just
let it
leave it
ride
there,
off
but
into
not-
the sunset.
okay.
So,
Thank you.
Article 4 are the property tax exemptions, the 41C.5 property tax exemption. The Board of Assessors will be meeting next week to make a recommendation that would be a percentage that would equate to essentially, I believe, $625 for the exemption amount. Again, they're meeting next Wednesday. Article 5 would be to adjust the fiscal year 2018 appropriations. So this is based on an increase in state aid, which was small, but then also a decrease in the assessments that we receive from the state, mainly the charter school assessment. So that frees up funding that can be put towards our departments. $178,000 would be going towards the school department appropriation, and then we would have $76,000 to spread amongst the municipal departments. We'll be looking at putting money towards legal to help pay for the not the Robert Hill Way, but the 133 West Union Street litigation. There are expert witnesses associated with that we need to pay for. Also going towards inspectional services and to pay for inspections, and then also veteran services as well. We will also have an appropriation there that is not related to the general fund, an increase in the appropriation to the Fields Enterprise Fund to help pay for some repairs that we need to make to the irrigation systems in the fields.
Oh.
So, any questions associated with Article 5?
A few leaks in the pipes.
So, Articles 6 and 7 are to authorize the purchase of property for two parcels that are off of Oregon Road, with the intent being to add those as part of the town forest. We would be borrowing this money, so we would be requiring a 2/3 authorization at town meeting for this, but certainly something the board has talked about, how to acquire land, not just for open space, but for other municipal purposes. If the town's successful in moving this forward, this board would have succeeded in preserving over 55 acres so far between the Girl Scout camp, again, for municipal purposes, and this. Article 8 would be right now it's titled Approve Acquisition of Property. That would be taking the property known as Cadillac Paint. As Attorney Mead had alluded to earlier in her update, by taking the property, what we're able to do is actually able to wipe out the liens associated with the mortgages. What it does not wipe out and what survives that taking is the DEP lien, and so that's what we're working with DEP on in terms of releasing. And it sounds like we've made progress with that. So as long as we're willing to appropriate the money to do the cleanup, it sounds like they're willing to release the lien.
Super.
Good, nice.
So, Article 9, the Community Preservation Committee article. Article 10 would be a conservation restriction on Oak Street. Article 11, it's the Rail Transit District Multimodal Path Easement.
Well, could I just Article 10, so this is just a way of having Sudbury Valley trustees kind of take on the overseeing of the conservation.
Them holding the conservation restriction,
okay.
Correct. Article 11 is the multimodal path easement for the RTD. This was something that was part of the negotiations with the developer and the landholder. Article 12 is the MBTA access road easement.
That is with Stephen Hickey of Apple Ridge Realty Trust. Currently, we have an MOU with Mr. Hickey, which allows us to do the work that we're doing until this goes to town meeting.
Okay, so this allows that changing of the end of the road to have the turning and the better crosswalks and things, right? On the end
Yes,
of the
because
MBTA
currently
by Dunkin' Donuts.
we had a utility easement. What we did not have was a sidewalk easement on
Okay.
that property, and that's what we needed to do to
For the
flare
path and stuff.
flare it out.
Okay, thank you.
So, Article 13 are a number of zoning changes that have been bundled together in one article. You will be able to separate those out and have separate votes associated with each one. But again, for these purposes, they're under one article. Article 14 is the change of hours for the sale of alcohol. This gives the licensing authority the ability to change the hours to sell alcoholic beverages.
And that will then match the state hours.
It's accepting a state statute that gives you the ability to do that.
Okay.
Article 15 is the plastic bag ban, and I think the Sustainability Committee has done a noble job of reaching out to the business community and the general public and trying to get information out there.
Do you think do you think legally it's in pretty good shape? Are we gonna get, I just hate to go to town meeting and get all these, start trying to work out details on town meeting floor.
I don't think so. Attorney Mead has been involved in helping to draft this and looking over the language. I believe she looked over it today. So we feel pretty confident. I'm not sure of any bag bans that have been challenged.
Yeah, I guess I was just thinking kind of little details, like some, I just want to make sure.
Right.
So basically, this is the T-shirt bags that they're referring to. They call them the T-shirts.
Yeah,
Single
the very
handle.
thin-
Yeah, very
Yeah.
thin bags.
The grocery bags that you go to Shaw's, Market Basket, and some of the other
Right.
retailers in town.
And then the exceptions are listed down
Yeah.
here, so that's why I don't see it to be an issue.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I think seems to be kind of widespread support for
Yeah,
this.
there's
so.
quite a few exemptions to it as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
There's,
Right.
newspaper bags and
Right.
dry cleaning, plastic, and so there's
I
a
remember
host of them.
I remember reading something and someone was like, well, our town trash bags are plastic. It's like, well, that's a different type of plastic, and so.
All right.
Maybe thinner than ones we already have, but.
So Article 16 we covered. That's the amendment to the town forest bylaw. Article 17 is the marijuana moratorium extension. That is something that the board had requested at our last meeting. So, any other questions, any other thoughts? Because once you vote to close and post this, it is, at least for warrant articles, it is a done deal.
Nope.
And
So we're
if
not
we-
having to, I'm sorry.
If we want to pull something, we can pull it on town meeting.
We can
floor.
pull it, yes.
That was gonna be my question. Because I know there was discussion that we might not do them all. But we'll vote to close this and post it, and then if we need to pull something, we can just do it.
You can pull that,
town
yeah,
meeting
on
floor.
town meeting floor. I will be having a forum to go over the warrant articles on November 7th. The planning board is going to have a hearing on their related articles on November 9th. FinCom will be meeting next week to start their recommendation process. And trying to think if there are any other relevant dates.
Forum here?
The forum will be here, yes,
And what
starting
time?
at 6:30 p.m.
6:30.
Be there for a riveting experience. So,
Okay, so do I have a motion to close and post the special town meeting warrant for November 14th,
So moved.
2017?
So
Second.
moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that's 5-0. The next
Senses all that work.
thing on old new business is B, the discussion of the rededication of McGill Square. The dedication, or the creation of McGill Square predated Rob and I being on the board. I believe it was 5 years ago, and I believe that Steve and Yolanda and Joe were on the board. It's an area in front of Mexico City. That there was a house, the McGill House, and I guess the reason that we are considering the dedication there is that they had 5 sons serving in World War II at the same time. They had other contributions to the town over time, but I believe that you voted at that time to dedicate such a square. It's kind of been put on a back burner, so I sent you some things to consider. They were, one is the Seaman dedication of Seaman Field up at the baseball field at the high school. Two others are from other towns, little monuments that they've created in dedication of veterans. And then I sent you a narrative to consider for that. So I can, if we're going to move forward on that, I'd like to find out if the board is interested in moving forward or any comments on these things. And I can then look into what the costs would be that we could discuss maybe at the next meeting.
Yep.
Steve?
So, you know, I think these are very tasteful and certainly appropriate. Yeah, and I'm certainly supportive of taking the next step and, you know, getting some hard costs involved, and then we can evaluate it.
Okay, anyone else?
I just had a couple of quick comments. I know that at one time Steve and I were asked to look at memorials as a whole, and that's what we did. And we talked about unifying or making a uniform design for all memorials, current, past ones, current ones, and future ones. And there was quite a bit of discussion, and I thought, and maybe I'm wrong, I thought we had a decision, or we made a decision, but then the family wanted to get involved, and we waited to hear what they wanted, and thanks to your intervention, you had asked the family members, because we hadn't heard back from them for for a number of months, and apparently what we had drafted or what we had selected was not apropos to what they really were looking for. So we asked them to come up with a design themselves, and we were still waiting for that. Just to give some history as to how this went, and if I'm wrong, please correct me on
I
this.
think you're accurate, at least my recollections of, and you know, obviously quite a bit of time has gone by. I can't speak. I haven't had any contact with the family since that time.
Right.
I mean, we did go back and forth for you know, period of time, and then I think different events conspired to you know, personal and otherwise, to, you know, create this gap in time. You know, but it is something that we voted as a board to acknowledge, to recognize that space as McGill Square. And,
Correct.
And we certainly talked about what the town was willing to do at that point in time. So
I do remember, even though I wasn't on the board, I remember that deliberation. And if I remember correctly, the suggestion was to have it similar to Gordon A. Green Square and Richard Murphy Square. And that didn't seem to be satisfactory for the family. And with regard, and I think that reason was for the reason you spoke to, Joe, of uniformity. So I would suggest that, what is that?
Steve's chair.
Oh.
what was that? I thought it was Mark snoring.
That was quick, Steve.
Oh, my.
That was very quick.
Okay, what I would suggest is that the Gordon A. Green Square and other squares could use a facelift. They needed a facelift a few years ago. I think something like this, if we created something like this, we could down the road upgrade the rest of the squares to that level, instead of just having the future ones look like the ones that we have now. I think that they could all be upgraded. We don't have to do them all at the same time, but it wouldn't be a bad idea to do that.
Well, I'm just wondering if we get a price, a better price by doing a multiple rendering of memorials.
Well, I would say probably not,
Okay.
but I can look into that. Yeah.
One more question that I have, and that's relative to our recognition policy. And our policy states or encourages donations or participations by a family or by an individual, whoever. Now, do we, at this point, given kind of the background with some of the back and forth, are we confident that this particular recognition is going to be satisfactory to the family? And if you know that, fine. If you don't, I would suggest that as chair, you reach out, at least get, some feedback.
Well, I will, but at the end of the day, it's our decision.
Well, it is, but, again, it was our decision, way back when as well, and we went through, a back and forth. So just, I think it would just be a little proactive to.
Well, and I agree with you. Anything else?
Well, thanks, Carl, for taking this on. It's good.
Okay, then I will.
Hold on.
Yep.
So, just to reiterate what Joe said, so there was discussion, and our policy does look to ask for the people that are asking us to recognize them to participate in the funding for some of this. So I think that is something we should consider as we move forward with this one. Because it's part of our policy, that if someone's, because they came to us originally looking for the recognition, and
But I don't think our policies, it doesn't make it a requirement.
no, but
it just,
we
we
can
says
certainly,
we
especially,
encourage is what we do.
especially since we're going to them to make sure it passes their quote-unquote muster as to what it's supposed to be, right? Because many years ago, we did say we would do something, and it didn't.
Okay. I don't recall that being part of your policy, but I can look into it.
It's part of
There
the
are very
policy.
few people that are surviving in this family, and I think it's safe to say they're not in a position to be paying for the monuments in town.
At this point, my only recommendation would be to reach out and again, at least ensure that this is acceptable.
Right.
And I agree.
And if I may, if we do decide to go that route, then
Which
maybe I
route
would
is
like to go the brass plate stone, then I would think that I would like to entertain the fact that we do all the memorials that are downtown, so that way we have that uniform look instead of.
Well, see, that's why I included the Joe Seaman thing, because Joe Seaman was a veteran, and that is a veteran dedication.
Right.
So should that be the template instead of the ones that are downtown, similar to that?
If we do one, then I say we do them all.
All simultaneously?
Why not?
No, I think we need to look at funding, right? We can't just go ahead and,
Well-
this is not gonna be an inexpensive thing, and not that money is the only thing, but let's at least do one.
Well, keep in
see
mind
what it
that
costs, and then go
Gordon
from
A.
there.
Green no longer has relatives living in Ashland.
Right, that's
so-
what I'm saying. So some of these, it will be an expense of the
But
community
it's
to
of
do it.
historic value.
But,
That's how I look at it.
but the historic value, part of it is, one, the name of the square, and two, the type of sign that it is.
Mm-hmm.
Changing the sign changes the historic value of it.
Well, it does to some extent, but at the same token, if, I just don't want, oh, look, they have this over here, this is over here, they don't want to look piecemeal.
Well, quickly, do you like the look of the stone, what kind of looks like a gravestone with a plaque on it, or the rock with the plaque on it? If you had a choice.
What I was thinking, Carl, you've written, I presume, did you write this narrative?
Yeah.
So I think that's a nice narrative, but it's also kind of long. It's almost like a historical plaque as opposed to a marker. Sometimes you see those historical plaques that are kind of metal and they're larger, and there's some narrative there, which just strikes me almost similar to that.
Which when we looked at this in the last time, we looked at metal plaques. I think, Steve, you had done some research and had found something in Natick that was more of a on-a-pole plaque kind of thing.
It's just a suggestion of something.
Because driving by, which is
You're
what
not
you
gonna
want,
notice that.
you're not gonna notice
No.
that if you're driving by and it's on the ground, which is probably the reason why we were leaning towards
The wooden
the
signs like
wooden
we had
signs, so
before.
that way you
right.
have the visibility of passerby seeing, oh, okay. Where if you had it on the ground, the only ones that would actually see it would be anybody that actually stopped to take the time to go look at it, and passerbyers who are pedestrians that are just walking along the way.
I guess my response to that is this area is cluttered with wooden signs already, so it just would blend into all of the other signs that are there. And if people are driving into that intersection and reading signs, then we've got problems. I would think that it's foot traffic that's gonna be reading this and not people
Right,
driving.
that's it, foot traffic, that's it. But I mean, if someone was looking to make sure that people knew what that was for. So,
Well,
just for
I'll
the
do
record.
some research on it, report back next meeting.
Just thought, just something to think about.
Thank you.
Okay, see, BAA grants, fall round. This is our subcommittee of Rob and Steve.
Yep. Okay, I can report, you should have received,
We don't have the amounts yet.
Oh, okay.
you have,
Yep.
you have
Yep.
the recommendations, so you should have copies of both the narratives from the applications as well as the recommendations of the subcommittee. Just make note, the very first request, Anne Marie's Dance Center, I'm recusing myself on that. I more than likely will be involved in that project, so I will
bad
I'll
you had
defer
to get
that one. You'll have to treat that one separately. But the rest of the applications, we provided recommendations and for your deliberation.
I would suggest that items 2 and 3 that we should handle separately too, because I think Joe's gonna have to.
I have to defer myself from either one of those.
All the Ashland Day stuff.
Yep.
Right.
And the, well, maybe not the kids spot. I had one question, and I meant to get in touch with you, but my days got full. There's 2 requests for the
Yes, that-
same amount from David Foster?
Yes.
Those are 2 separate polls?
Those are the two replacement for the poles and at Stone Park for the basketball court.
Oh,
So they're
okay.
identical. It's good, because we have a limitation of $2,500.
Ah, okay.
It's kinda cagey.
Okay.
So he
I got
provided
it.
2 separate, because what's
Okay,
the
I
point
thought you
of
were
doing
duplicating.
one
Nope,
without
that's
the
fine,
other?
that's fine. I'm just like, why is there 2?
And I'll tell you, one of the things Rob and I talked about when we deliberated on this was, there was a number of what I would call capital items here, infrastructure items, like the basketball court,
Yeah.
like the item at Kids Spot, things that have a lifespan that a great number of people will enjoy. So there's quite a few of those in this particular grouping. So, but of course we have decisions at every turn is one of our legacy
Right.
grants, and we always we have a fondness certainly for the garden club and all the good work they do. We always fund them, but again, this is for the board's deliberation here. So if I understand correctly, I'm recusing myself from number 1, and Joe, you're recusing yourself from
2 and 3.
2 and 3. Okay.
That leaves the others.
Yeah.
And why are you recusing yourself from one, Steve? You said
Because
you
I
would
may be involved
with-
in that project, so I just thought.
In
Yeah,
what
your
way?
parts.
In what
Can
way?
you talk a little bit about the project and?
Well, it's called Illuminate Downtown, and will take place, it's something that will be kind of a downtown crawl that'll take place early in December. I think what is the week of the Christmas lighting? But
It's the first Saturday in
So it's
September.
the second Saturday that this would occur, and there'll be a variety of locations have been identified. There'll be different illumination efforts. There'll be some music. There'll be some, refreshments at various spots around downtown as a.
Too bad we
as a-
couldn't combine the two.
say, it seems unfortunate that it can't happen on the same night.
Well, I'm not the planner of it,
Right.
so I would
Right.
suggest you read the narrative and get an understanding of that, and.
Is that them?
Okay, and you're
I just saw the
involved
summary.
through
That's all I
Arts
saw.
Arts
Ashland
Ashland,
Alliance?
yes,
I have the whole
yes.
thing if you want to
So
read it.
that would be my
I would like to
recusal.
read that
Yeah.
one.
That
Do
one.
you have it real quick? Can I look at it real quick?
What are we looking at real quick?
The Anne Marie's Dance Center.
Yeah, so my
Proposal.
recollection from, it's, they want to illuminate this path through downtown and then have various kinds of artists and performers at various places throughout the, and
They're performers, they're
well,
dance
it's part of
students,
what
so.
they're doing. No, they're gonna have others as well. That's the
There'll be
Arts
some
Alliance.
music at different locations. I mean, it's December, so it's gonna incorporate some inside locations. I think the Historical Society, the library, a few locations outside as well. So the corner spot, I think is part of it, so.
No. You know, in my reading of it, I don't, you know, I'm not, you know, I'm not familiar with all the details of it, but the application, it sounded like an interesting and worthwhile project, you know, in terms of, you know, just kind of another downtown activity.
Yeah, I'm fine.
And then the question of coordinating it with another project is a legitimate one, but, you know, so I couldn't speak to that. But
Well,
it sounded
unfortunately,
like
it's
a
at the
new
same time
kind of innovative project that has some, you know, merit to it. Certainly something that seemed worthwhile to fund.
Okay, how do we usually handle this? Do we vote as presented with the ones that are accepted, or if we don't have any questions on these?
I would pull the ones that you're gonna have
The first
exemption, or you're gonna have people abstaining from out, and then move to
And then-
approve the rest of them.
Okay, and then without reading all of them, Susan notifies them that they've been, okay.
And thank you, first off, thanks, Susan, for all
Yes,
the.
yeah, very
the
thorough.
Okay, are there any questions
Collation.
on any of them other than the first three?
Nope, you just answered them, so.
Okay, so.
Can I just comment, like, some of them really, there's really a lot of creativity and, you know, we really generate a lot of positive activity through this grants program over the year. I'm just looking at the new one from this wellness committee,
Yeah.
to have outdoor exercise equipment, for example.
Right.
You know, that's pretty cool. I was just at a place, recently where we came upon some outdoor, you know, fitness, and it was, you know, a fun thing to do. So now, you know,
Who
folks
is
are gonna
the-
put something like that together.
Who is the wellness committee?
I think it's,
The wellness committee is.
HR.
Yeah, it's HR with several, town employees working to put several programs together, for employees. This will obviously benefit the community as well, because it will be outside
Yeah,
and
that's the cool
and
part
everyone
of it.
can access it.
Yeah,
Cool.
this is a nice project because it's, and we're only funding a small part. The cost of this, all this equipment is like $17,000. It's gonna be, you know, kind of these, I forget what they
Outdoor
call,
workout
they workout
stations.
stations, right, that'll be located behind the community center.
Oh,
So-
cool.
So that's a pretty cool one. We did, of course, the basketball courts, the kids spot item.
Friends of the Library doing those tide pools,
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, Purple Ink, we've been funding the murals. You know, this would be, was this the fourth mural, or the fifth mural? I think we've
yeah.
funded, but, the one question we did have, and, you know, we kind of treat all the sporting associations and youth sports programs in a similar way. We try to be fair and equitable and give something to everybody and make it equalized. But the one thing Rob and I did talk about, the girls' hockey program is totally self-funded.
yeah.
And we talked about digging into that a little bit. Why is that particular program self-funded where,
For
you
years
know,
they've been.
where everything else, because it is part of the school. It's a joint
Is it
Midway,
considered
Ashland.
an intramural
I don't know
program?
if it's a full sport at the
I
school.
thought it was a varsity sport, but, you know, that may be the reason.
Well, that's a question to ask
that's a
Mr.
good
Adams
question.
when it comes, but we bumped them up a little bit because they are totally self-supported and not supported through the regular sports
budget.
program, so, yeah.
Yeah, that's one exception.
Yeah.
Okay, so do we have a motion to accept the recommendations of the subcommittee for funding of the BAA grants with the exception of the first three items?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that's 5-0. Okay, so we can take the first three. Do I have a motion to approve number one, Anne Marie's Dance Center, Illuminate Downtown Ashland,
So moved.
as recommended? Second?
Hold on, we actually didn't recommend. I move that we
Oh, yeah,
approve
we did.
Anne Marie's Dance Center Illuminate Downtown for the full 1,500.
And that was your recommendation, because it said to defer to the BOS.
We said defer to Be the West, so I think it's a great program.
I think so.
I think in the future, they should try to tie it in with what's going on with the tree lighting, but
We can do that.
Okay, second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed and abstain?
One
Okay,
abstain.
that's 401. The second one is Ashland Day Committee. Amount requested for $250. Funding will be used for the Halloween parade and party. The recommendation is to fund it fully. Do we have a motion to support that?
Can we do 2 and 3 together? Right, because they're both Ashland Day. I move that we support the Ashland Day Committee request for $250 for the funding of the Halloween party, and the Ashland Day Committee request for $750 for additional lights for Montenegro Square Christmas lighting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstained.
Okay,
And
401.
Sue?
So I just, if I
thank
could
you,
make
gentlemen.
one comment, Mr. Chair, well, first of all, again, thank you to Susan for the collation of all of this as it comes in. But I just want to comment, I think this has become a much more efficient way of getting through these applications. I used to personally dread the meetings where we had to go through each and every one, so.
Well, thank you, gentlemen,
Thank you,
for
gentlemen.
taking on
Yeah.
that added responsibility.
Well, thank you, and it's actually very, relatively easy. We go through it, and good applications, good
Yep.
detail. We go
Right.
through, we don't have a lot of huge issues. I mean, one of the things we talk about is like how much.
I dread the conversation after it's over, but go ahead and finish.
So, the only thing I would add is some of these items, maybe we should consider taking into the regular town budget. And I think we do have a big thing to consider when the decisions are returned, which I think, is this the last year for that?
Aren't they coming up for their?
Yeah, they'll be coming up for
Yeah,
renewal, though.
So
Yeah.
that's been a big chunk, and I would think if they're gonna reapply and if we're gonna do another match, we look at it and having kind of permanent budget resources for it, or at least to match their grant funding, if that
Right.
should happen.
Yeah, agreed. And thanks to Jen also for setting up the subcommittee date and setting up the agenda as well. So we make sure that we're in compliance with each and every.
It was tough, 6 o'clock on a Friday, it was hard finding space.
It was
at town
6:15
hall.
actually on Friday night, but we.
You gentlemen did post it?
We did,
Oh, it was posted properly. The agenda was posted as well, and we did our duty. So.
Okay, well, thank you very much. to
Policy crisis
and
averted.
to all of you. Okay, we've done selectmen appointments, so we are moving on to town manager reports, I believe. Michael, A is MWRA connection update.
Sure, thanks, Mr. Chair. So I'll give you 2 updates here. One on the permanent connection that was passed at town meeting back in May. So in your packet, you have just a draft timeline of what is going to be necessary to get that finished. We're at the point where we can put out bid documents. We have to do a couple of regulatory things with DEP, but it should be relatively benign. Again, the engineering and design for the Southborough connection was completed back in October. We just right now need to submit the vault design to the MWRA for their comment, and look at the Hosmer pump station upgrade permits to MWRA. And then we're actually looking at a parcel of land right on the town line to put in some of the electronics, like the SCADA systems and everything associated with that. I will need to request an extension of MassWorks funds, which I will plan on doing that either at the end of this month or the beginning of November. Again, we'll put those bid packages out, and hopefully by the time everything is completed, we will have construction complete by this time next year. So that will be a permanent connection that we could turn on at that point in time for emergency purposes.
Like
So the supplemental connection, that's more bureaucratic in nature, and that is something that we're having to work out with Hopkinton and the MWRA. But our point is that we're just going to move forward with going ahead and building the connection for those emergency purposes. And then we will concurrently be working with Hopkinton and the MWRA as part of joining the MWRA as one of their communities. But as you know, even though we had at the very beginning of the summer a very rainy summer, we have hit what's known as or what's classified as drought conditions. So therefore, we've initiated the process of an emergency connection with the MWRA through Southborough. We've requested DEP declare a water supply emergency. We're still waiting to hear back from them, but that was recent that we sent that request. We've sent a letter to the MWRA asking them for permission for emergency water. We should be having a meeting with them in the middle of November. I think the last time we had to do that, Jen and Regita went. And hopefully, having passed the connection in May, they should look a little bit more positively on a connection. And then we also have a letter going to Southborough asking for permission. Last year, we had requested permission for 200,000 gallons per day. We will probably be looking at that same setup this time. So that's the MWRA connection updates.
Okay, thank you, Michael. B is the Riverwalk update.
All right. So earlier in the summer, or late summer, I should say, we made the decision in conjunction with the Open Space and Recreation Committee to issue RFPs to do the final set of engineering, and also for a firm to do clerk of the works services for the Riverwalk project. We received, I believe it was 5 or 6 firms. 6 firms. We interviewed 2 of them. We're in the final decision-making phase of determining which one of those 2 will be selected to do the engineering and, again, serve as clerk of the works services. I should also point out that we did get confirmation yesterday from the federal government, or actually from the state, that the federal government had released the $300,000 in Land and Water Conservation Fund grant money. So that's a big win for us. That was part of, that was 1/4 of the funding of that project. So that's moving forward, and we're still looked to be under contract by the end of this fiscal year.
And kudos to everybody that worked on that grant application. Thank you very much.
Timeline?
So we should have, we could probably start the trail work earlier than the bridge work, but we'll definitely have everything under contract by the end of FY18. So that would be June 30th, 2018. And we'll be starting I think what, 2 to 3 months? The big bridge
so
could be.
Yeah, so it would depend. The bridge work will depend somewhat seasonal in terms of when they can start that. So I don't think the actual construction will take that long once we get it started. The trail work will be relatively.
So potentially fall next year?
Yeah.
Completion?
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, you know, Carl, you had mentioned there was a number of people who worked on that grant.
Yeah, I was going to ask you to name them.
To point out Megan Dos Anjos, our conservation agent, as well as Beth Rosenblum and Roberta Suleman and Jen worked very hard on that grant. I think I got everybody.
Very nice.
And you mentioned the clerk of the works.
Yeah, so this firm, in addition to doing the final stage of the engineering of the bridge design and stuff, would also serve as the clerk of the works for the project moving forward. So making sure that things are done by spec, you know, construction oversight.
Cool.
That's good.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Next is C, the Howe Street landfill update.
Okay, so there's, again, a couple of different projects related to Howe Street. There's the gas migration project and the gas permeation wells. That is entering in its last phases. There's also of construction. They just need to complete the vent system on the backside of the berm, and then they will put a fence up and then attach that to the fence. I'm pleased to say the planning board reached an agreement with Amoresco, and so they have issued their special permit for Amoresco to do their connection and finish up what they need to do to get the Howe Street solar photovoltaic facility operational. The planning board required some changes in the berm, which is fine. I think it's going to lead to a much better project for the neighbors and everybody around there. So the berm is being completed. It will be stabilized by winter, meaning that they will, you know, it'll be grass seed, and then they will do the planting of the trees and the rest of the vegetation in the spring. So that project's finally loosened up and moving forward.
When will we see any activity with respect to the solar panels actually being in operation?
Being probably by the end of the year, I think. So they have to put the poles in and then go ahead and connect.
And put the equipment, the interconnect, and they should be good to go, right? Everything, all their
panels are
floor,
there.
yes,
Right. So they've resolved things with the abutters to get the access they needed to grow
Right.
that.
Yeah.
Nice.
Big Indian.
And Jen's also worked very, very hard on, I think, on the gas migration project as well, and working with our contractor there to do that work. So,
Nice.
Awesome.
Good job.
Thanks, Jerry.
Good job.
And no issues with the beavers in that?
no beaver issues yet.
Okay.
Yet, being the operative word. So.
Those troublesome beavers. Okay, D, community programs update, I think that's Jen's.
Yeah, we're gonna give that to Jen.
So last meeting, you received an update on human services from Jennifer, and I wanted to give you an update on the other sort of portion when we sort of restructured that department at the community center. We had human services and then we had community programs. So Kelly Rund at the recreation department has been doing a lot of coordination, trying to better sort of coalesce all of the programs that are going on in town. So monthly right now, we've had the recreation department, the senior center, decisions at every turn, the school department, the library, the Friends of the Library, meeting monthly and talking about programs, what they're offering over the next month and quarter, as a way to try to better coordinate, leverage each other's programs so that we're not duplicating efforts, but then also we're better communicating to the public about what's being offered. Kelly's been doing a quarterly newsletter that I think is helpful, and we're trying to take that next step and to sort of better package some programs. And I think actually this is a really good time. We have some good stuff going on in the next 2 weeks that I'll talk about, but I think it even speaks to the BAA grant where we're talking about better coordinating maybe the tree lighting with Illuminate Ashland. So we had talked about, you know, having maybe monthly or seasonal themes that we can try to package in a way that we can promote all the really great programs that are going on. So those are happening with departments, within the town, with boards and committees, with nonprofits, and how do we sort of better show the town what we have to offer. And so we had talked about maybe something like brighten up your holidays, and we could put, you know, work with Ashland Day and promote the tree lighting, promote the Illuminate Ashland, promote the Corner Spots tree program where businesses are going to adopt a tree and market their tree. And this, I'm assuming, several other programs that we could put a nice little package together and sort of let the residents know, and even surrounding towns, what we have to offer in terms of programs. Coming up, Megan, a conservation agent, has been working really closely. I think that's one of the, with recreation, it's one of the sort of best, I think, practices so far. They've been really working closely on trying to find new interesting programs for the community. So this Saturday, they're doing Terror in the Trees at Ashland State Park at 5 p.m. So Megan will be bringing a group of people through the park and talking about the predators and the prey within. We're talking about animals.
I tried to get him to change it to cool stuff in the trees, from Terror in the Trees.
I think it's cool.
It's a Halloween theme.
It's a Halloween theme to go along with the month of October. So she'll be talking about the predators and prey that are in the forest in the state park. For those that are too afraid to go, Kelly will be doing a what she's calling a pumpkin stroll down the state park road right after that at between 6 and 8. So she's been furiously carving pumpkins, and they'll be lit all the way down.
That's cool.
And then we're
Very
hoping
cool.
to reuse those for Kim's. She has a walk with Meg on Mondays with the seniors, and so a guided walk through, and hopefully have the jack-o'-lanterns through so they can have also take part in that festivity.
Cool.
So that's what we're sort of trying to do, is bring all these town departments and work together on these type of programs. And then the next Saturday on October 28th, after the half marathon, there'll be the Fall Fest at Corner Spot, where we'll be sort of celebrating the end of the season for the business in the shed. There'll be, you know, really fun sort of seasonal pumpkin games. There'll be music, there'll be food trucks, and so we're hoping that people will come. And so we'll
looking for a one-day liquor license.
Yeah, the town manager
No,
drinking booth.
I was serious.
I wanted to comment on that, Jen, that Megan reported on some of the stuff at Conservation Commission on Monday night, and it's very new for Conservation Commission to be talking about this stuff, and I was really excited about the programs that she's doing in collaboration with Kelly. You know, it all goes to community building,
Right.
and bringing different groups together and different groups to an educational level on areas where they might not ordinarily go. So I think
Right.
that's a good job.
And we're hoping to expand over the next few months, so that was sort of the core group. I'm hoping to get in front of the Open Space and Recreation Committee in the next coming months so that we can start to sort of plug
Stuff
into
for the
their type of
spring.
programs.
Yeah.
We're working with Ashland Day, working with the Farmers Market, working with, you know, these boards and committees and nonprofits that are already doing programs that we can sort of maybe help promote. Maybe we can sort of build off of. Another program that was great was Outside RX, so working, that was basically the AMC came in to do a hiking program. And that was, again, it was Megan working with Kelly, and really promoting that with the Friends of the Library. And it was so successful that they're hoping to get a few more dates, so they had 2 dates in September. Well, one in September, one in October, and now they're looking for later fall, maybe even something in the winter.
And AMC is Appalachian Mountain
Mountain
Club?
Club, yes. And so I think 23 families came to the last
Wow, nice.
hike. So it was really great.
You need to get all
Yeah.
on Facebook.
Well, a lot of it has been,
No, like really.
but it has to be more.
Well, the thing is, it's become like a full-time job to try to get to all of this stuff.
Yeah.
So we need a designated ambassador to show up at all
Yeah,
of
really,
these
okay,
things.
I'll
But,
do this one, you do that one, you.
but it's really encouraging community-wide that all of this stuff is happening. It seems like we get an announcement for something almost every day on the Board of Selectmen, and good for all of those people.
Yeah, nice, congratulations.
Good stuff.
You're doing good stuff. Lot of good stuff going on in
Is that
town.
it, Jen, or?
Thank you, Jen.
Okay, thanks very much, Jen.
Thanks, Jen.
Awesome.
Okay, we are at board reports. Joe, you want to lead off?
Board reports. Yes, sir. Couple of quick things. I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank those people who were involved in running the Stone Park Pavilion. It'll be shut down as of Sunday. We have a birthday party there Sunday, and it's a great venue, and people have utilized it throughout the summer months and even spring. But we shut down because we shut the water down, so the bathrooms will be shut down as well. But it was a great a great season. It was well used by everybody from within the community and those that came from out of town as well. And the bathrooms were maintained. The snack shop did a great thing, and it was all done by volunteers. So I just want to thank all those, and they know who they are. I don't want to mention everybody. But we have a Halloween
Might have
parade
a
and party.
conflict of interest.
Well, it would be a conflict of interest, especially where my wife is home. I'd just like to just advertise the annual 32nd Halloween parade and party, which would be, I know, I'm getting old, which would be the 27th, which is a Friday. It's always the Friday before Halloween. And we'll congregate at Montenegro Square. We used to congregate down at the Pidway School, but because of the trains and the number of trains that are coming through town now, we felt that it would be safer for the kids and their parents not to have to cross the tracks and break up the parade. So we congregate at Montenegro Square, and we march down to the Mendez School, which is, half the parade route itself, but and then we have a little party inside where everybody gets a goodie bag and apple cider, donut holes, and every contest winner, costume winner, gets a $50 gift certificate to Toys R Us, and there are 7 different categories. So it's well worth it. We had 320 last year. We anticipate there'll be a little bit more. But that's it, Mr.
It's
Chair.
always been a fun thing.
Very nice.
It's been fun.
Yeah, it's
They
been a
still
while,
in
but-
business, Toys R Us?
They're reorganizing. They're still open, but they're reorganizing, so. But
Okay,
that is
thank
it.
you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Joe. Yolanda?
Couple things. Just a reminder, tomorrow night, Dreams Come True Boutique, which is a new clothing and accessory boutique. They are celebrating 6 months of business. They are over
on West Union Street. So if you're not doing anything tomorrow, I think it's from like 5 to 7 or something. So you can do that. I'm heading to Leadership Metro West tomorrow. It's our first full day after our retreat, and Jen is doing it with me. So that should be fun. A couple of congratulations to the VFW and the Ashland Sporting Association for a great time at the Beer Fest on Saturday night. I saw Rob there and a bunch of people from Ashland. It was great. Mike, town manager, was there, and I think people enjoyed themselves. And I think it was a good fundraiser for the VFW that is really trying to clean up and be a home for different things here in Ashland. Next week on Thursday, the Metro West Landline event that I mentioned at the Charles River, at the Upper Charles Forum, is actually happening here in Ashland. It's Thursday morning at 10 a.m. at the State Park. They are opening up the State Park for us to be able to do it. You can register at mapc.org. So if you're in town that day, it would be a great event to come. And the Metro West Landline is a project being funded and organized by the Metro West Regional Collaborative. And it is looking at connecting the trails through different towns. So Ashland is doing their part, but Sherborne isn't doing much. So how can we connect Sherborne in between Ashland and Holliston, and also going into Framingham and some other locations as well. And then the last thing I have is on Saturday, October 28th, is the Ashland Half Marathon, supported by the Ashland Sporting Association and the Metro West YMCA. I believe you can still register online. If it's going to be a great day, it should be a lot of fun. And then to the corner spot afterwards. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Yolanda. Steve?
Thank you. Just a couple small things. Probably for the last couple of years, I've been attending the Council on Aging meetings. They take place on the first Thursday of every month. Typically Jen and Michael attend as well, and they're a great group. I just wanted to publicly reach out to any of the seniors that happen to be watching, particularly regarding town meeting this year. I think there's a lot of exciting articles that benefit the community as a whole. Not just the exemption, the senior exemption, but that's very important. I think, I encourage seniors to come out to town meeting to support that, because even if it doesn't benefit them directly, it benefits another senior. So I think it's important that all the constituents come out and support a lot of these projects that we're proposing to better the town. So. I also try to attend as much as possible the town manager's coffee at the community center, and they're always interesting conversations. We've been getting some different faces, Michael, over the last several, so it's good conversation. It's not always the same old, so it's, I'm glad that you're doing it. It's a good thing. I'd like to see it grow and really contribute to our community dialogue. And then the last thing on my list is I just want to thank the Ashland community on behalf of the Ashland Farmers Market. We completed our 6th season last week, and it was just a very successful season for us. Our attendance was up dramatically over last year, and so it's been just a terrific community program. And I just want to throw a plug. It's a little early, but put on your calendars. November the 18th is our pre-Thanksgiving market, which is at the middle school, Ashland Middle School, 9 to 1 on November the 18th. And as Otis says, be there or be square.
Can I interrupt 1 second? There was a picture on Facebook. Now, I know you just graduated. And
no, the answer is no, you can't.
And it was an obedience school he went to?
Oh, yes.
I just wanted to comment on, no, because there was one
it's the Board of Selectmen meeting.
But I just saw, there's one photo that I saw with tissue paper all over the floor.
That wasn't just tissue paper. He's discovered toilet paper. But I think this is, that's a little decorum.
No, it just... You brought up
okay, thank you, Steve and Joe. Rob?
Yes, just a few items. I wanted to, Yolanda brought up the trail conference here in Ashland, and thank you for going to that. My only, which I think it's an important thing and a great project. my only little kind of issue with MAPC is they always schedule their events for 10 o'clock on work days, which is really, for volunteer public officials, it's not, like, I can't go to that. And I'm happy you're able to get in your schedule, but that's something they, you know, for whatever reason, they never schedule things at night, which, you know, okay, so it's one less night meeting, I guess. So that's looking on the good side, but, you know, it'd be nice to, you know, if they
I will
schedule
mention it to
something.
our coordinator.
Yeah, thank you. That's, and thank you for going to that. I did also just want to mention the Oktoberfest and, you know, and the efforts at the VFW, as Steve Greenberg and Merle Kunis and the Greater Ashland Lions all worked on that. And it was, you know, beer tasting and sake, and so it was in a great band. So it was a good cultural event. Very well done. I did also want to mention, we went, you know, speaking of the town forest, it was Saturday before last, we had the Dr. Curtis Hoffman, an Ashland resident and a Bridgewater State professor of archaeology, gave an archaeological walk in the town forest. And then really the fascinating thing about it is, one of the reasons the town forest is so unique, it is apparently the site of apparently hundreds of Native American structures of very basic types. And I didn't never realize this, but it was apparently some sort of sacred site, if you agree with Dr. Hoffman and his students, that and there are some singular, you know, very basic wood stone structures there, and I thought that was fascinating. He's actually mapped them out, and there's apparently hundreds of these structures, and most of them are, some are circular stone formations or mounds, or and some are even what they call manitos, which are very I wouldn't say crude, but human shapes in the rocks. That's his theory. So it's really quite singular, and they're not colonial stone structures, according to Dr. Hoffman. But you know, I just wanted to bring that. That was fascinating. And he does that every year, so I would recommend people get to it when he does it. And the opens, the Trail Committee sponsors that. And the other thing I wanted to bring up in terms of policy, I don't know if people are. I think we're getting these emails about the north-south rail link. Have people been reading that? And to me, I think in terms of some of the north-south rail link, for people who haven't heard of it, is the idea of finally getting a rail connection between North and South Station in Boston. And I think that's really an important project, and it affects us out here in terms of being able to move around the metropolitan area. So I just want to put that on people's agenda. There's apparently a group, I wasn't, again, they're working with Mass DOT to try to make that a reality, and you know, it's something we should consider getting more involved in, and you know, I'll try to stay up with what's going on with that. I'd say in terms of us and getting around the metropolitan area and making mass transit something that's more practical for people, that it's you know, I'd say it's more important than the high-speed rail to Springfield, you know, that would go through here. I'd say for us it's, you know, the idea of leaving Ashland and maybe be able to get to Cambridge or points on the North Shore line through commuter rail would be really, you know, groundbreaking kind of thing. It's the gap in our mass transit that's been existed, you know, between North and South Station. So I just wanted to mention that. So that's it, Mr. Chairman.
Okay,
Thank you,
Rob. I just wanted to reiterate something that Steve commented on, and thank everybody involved in the farmers market. It's one of those great success stories for Ashland. It's something that brings a real diversity to downtown. So thank you for your participation, and thank you to all of the people that are involved in it. I know it takes a lot of effort from a lot of people every weekend, which is a real commitment, and it's a good thing for Ashland. So second of all, I wanted to just reiterate something that I spoke about earlier. It's something that we have supported as a board, and it was Kathy Rooney's work on the living wall downtown. Kathy's worked really hard on that, and some of the students from Framingham State came down to help her out. Jack Lewis was there to help out in the planting of the wall on Saturday, and I believe Sunday maybe too, but it's something that we've talked about for a long time that's finally, hopefully, will come to fruition and will expand over time. And Michael, you might want to help me with this one, because I don't want to get it wrong. But there was dedication last week of the parking spaces for Rifles to Rods. That's the name of the group. And the officers, I believe, are Officer Carpuzis and Ryan Puzo?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, and they were the driving forces behind it. You remember they came before us earlier in the year, and it came to fruition last week. It was a nice dedication. Those guys seemed really pleased with it, and good for them. And
yeah, we had a good response. I mean, we've received emails from as far away as Arizona, people saying that it's a nice gesture. So,
Great.
So, thank you to them as well. And that's all I have. So, if we don't have anything else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you very much.
Good night.